Your food disgusts me, Victor Langford shouted. Who let this little black girl touch the menu on my yacht? Annie Carter jolted so hard her fingers almost slipped from the pan handle. Hello, sir, Annie said, swallowing as the heat rose against her cheeks. I know this is sudden, but… Stop what you're doing right now, Victor shouted. Annie glanced back at the pan. The butter was seconds away from burning. The fish resting beside her had already waited too long. If she stopped now, the sauce would split, the plate would die, and every guest outside would know something had gone wrong. Just 2 minutes, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Please give me a little time. Victor's eyes narrowed. Did you not hear what I said? Yes, sir, she said softly. I heard you. Then step away from my stove. Victor's gaze dragged over her, from her cap to her stained sleeve, then to the pan she was still guarding as if the meal mattered more than his anger. What happened to the head chef? He demanded. And why was a disaster like this allowed to happen in my kitchen? Before Annie could answer, a young staff member rushed in from the service corridor. Sir, he said, stopping beside one of the managers. Chef Valmont. He ate something he was allergic to. He's in the emergency area now. The medic team is with him. Victor turned slowly toward him. The emergency area? His voice dropped, but it did not soften. Something that serious happened on my yacht, during my gala. And none of you thought to tell me before taking action on your own? The staff member lowered his eyes. We were trying to keep service moving, sir. By letting her cook? Victor pointed straight at Annie, not with surprise now, but with accusation, as if her very presence at the stove was an insult someone had placed there deliberately. I want to know who had the nerve to replace my chef without my permission, he said. Who decided this? Who dared put her in charge of cooking for my guests? The young staff member hesitated. His eyes moved quickly around the kitchen, searching for the safest place to lay the blame. When he found it, his voice steadied. It was the sous chef, sir, he said. We tried to stop it, but you know how it works. With Chef Valmont unavailable, she had the authority to make the call. Annie turned toward him, startled. They had not tried to stop anything. Most of them had stood frozen while the sauce broke. The fish cooled, and the plates waited empty. He looked at Annie, then back at Victor. And she was arrogant about it, sir. Annie, I mean. She ignored us when we warned her not to touch the main course. A small sound moved through the kitchen. Not quite agreement, not quite protest. Victor's jaw tightened. Where is she? Victor's voice rose, filling the hot, narrow kitchen. Marjorie, where are you? I want an explanation right now. When Annie heard Marjorie's name, something in her chest pulled tight. Annie could not stand there and let all of it fall on her. Sir, Annie said quickly, this isn't her fault. Please don't punish her. Victor cut his eyes toward her. That is not your concern, he said. You should be ashamed of what you've done before speaking on anyone else's behalf. Annie felt the words strike her, but she did not lower her head. I haven't done anything to be ashamed of, sir. Victor's voice came down hard. Arrogant, he snapped. Unbelievable. Where is she? I want to see that woman right now. From the far end of the kitchen, a woman in a white chef coat stepped out from behind the line. Victor's tone told her this was no longer about dinner. It was about power. She wiped her hands on a towel and walked toward him. Mr. Langford, she said, keeping her voice controlled. Chef Valmont went into anaphylactic shock. The main course was halfway through service prep. We had less than 12 minutes before the delay reached the dining room. I did not ask for a weather report, Victor snapped. I asked why a kitchen service assistant is standing at the stove on my yacht. Marjorie glanced at Annie. For a second, something like regret crossed her face. Because she knew what to do, Marjorie said. Victor stared at her. She knew what to do? Yes, sir. Annie felt the words land harder than she expected. No one in that kitchen had ever said that about her in front of anyone important. Not once. Victor gave a short, humorless laugh. That is your defense? You say she can do it, Victor said, looking from Marjorie to Annie. But I doubt those hands of hers were even properly washed. Has she been tasting food with them too? How could anyone trust a plate after that? Annie's face went still. That makes me even more disgusted. Annie cut in before Marjorie could speak. That is a rude assumption, sir, she said, her voice quiet but clear, and I understand the hygiene rules of this kitchen. I know exactly what has to be cleaned, sanitized, covered, and changed before anyone touches food. A few cooks looked up. Not because she had shouted. She had not. It was the calmness that made them look. Marjorie's shoulders stiffened, but she did not look away. The sauce was splitting, the fish was over-rested, the squash puree was flat. She identified all three before anyone else moved. I made the call. The young staff member shifted uncomfortably. Trevor, one of the line cooks, looked down at the cutting board as if it had become suddenly fascinating. Victor's face darkened. You made the call to hand my menu to a girl who washes herbs? Annie flinched, though she tried not to. Marjorie said nothing at first. Then she looked toward the line, toward the cooks who had gone pale when Chef Valmont collapsed, toward the servers still waiting for something to carry out. No one else would take it, she said. Not one person. Everyone understood what was at stake. Everyone knew if the course failed, the person in charge would be blamed. They were afraid, Mr. Langford. Afraid of losing their jobs, afraid of your reaction, afraid of being the name attached to a ruined gala. Victor's eyes sharpened. And this is supposed to make me feel better? No, Marjorie said. It is supposed to explain why I listened when Annie spoke. Annie's hand tightened around the towel. Marjorie continued, her voice steadier now. This wasn't the first time I saw her fix something. I've watched her correct broken sauces without being asked. I've watched her save oversalted stock, adjust timing on fish, catch mistakes before trained cooks notice them. She doesn't brag. She doesn't push herself forward. Most days she tries not to be seen at all, but she understands food. Victor's mouth twisted slightly, as though the word understands sounded offensive when placed near Annie. Marjorie looked at him plainly. Tonight, she was the only one in this kitchen who saw a way forward. For the first time, Annie wanted to disappear more than she wanted to breathe. Praise felt almost as dangerous as blame. It drew eyes. It raised questions. It carried her toward the very attention she had spent 2 years avoiding. Victor turned back to Annie and finally read the small name tag pinned to her apron. Annie, he said, each syllable carrying more insult than curiosity. Kitchen service assistant? Annie felt every eye in the room settle on the little badge on her chest. She wished, for one foolish second, that she could cover it with her hand. Yes, she said. Victor stepped closer. And someone like you dared to stand at the stove and serve my guests? That was how Annie survived most days. She listened to what food needed, because people rarely asked what she needed. Victor looked at Marjorie again. Do you understand who is outside that door? Yes, sir. Senators. Investors. People who flew in from New York, Dallas, Palm Beach. People who write checks with more zeros than your entire kitchen will see in a year. He pointed back at Annie. And you trusted my reputation to her? Marjorie's mouth tightened. I trusted the food to the person who understood it. That was the wrong answer. Victor's expression went still in a way that made the room colder than shouting would have. He walked past Marjorie and stopped a few feet from Annie. She could smell his cologne now, sharp and expensive, cutting through the butter and thyme. Look at me, he said. And you thought you were qualified to serve a plated course at a private charity gala? Annie swallowed. I thought the guests needed to be served. You thought? Victor said. That is the problem. People in your position are not here to think. You are here to follow instructions. Marjorie took half a step forward. Mr. Langford, he turned on her. I am not finished. Marjorie stopped. Victor looked back at Annie. Do you know what happens when people like you get ambitious in rooms like this? You embarrass everyone who is generous enough to let you in. She wanted to say she had not asked to be in charge. She wanted to say she had stepped forward only because everyone else was afraid. She wanted to say the food outside was already being eaten, and if he would stop shouting long enough to listen, he might hear that no one was complaining. But Annie had learned young that truth did not always protect the person telling it. So she said only, I'm sorry, sir. Victor smiled slightly, as if the apology proved his point. You should be. Sam Whitaker stood near the prep table, both hands curled around the edge of it. Sam looked at Annie and saw the way she held herself. Chin lowered, shoulders still, not defeated, but braced. He had once asked her why she let people talk to her like she was nothing. Annie had said, I didn't come here to be seen. Sam had told her, child, sometimes hiding is just another way of letting the wrong people own the room. I know I acted in a hurry, Annie said, her voice low but steady. But if you can, please trust me this once. Victor Langford looked at her as if the word trust had dirtied the air between them. Trust you? He said. Trust that everyone will find out a black girl is trying to live out some dream of becoming head chef. Then feel touched by it and call the food delicious. Annie held the towel tighter in her hand. She wanted to look away, but she did not. Why don't you try what I made? She asked. Then maybe you'll feel more at ease. Victor gave a short laugh. I couldn't swallow anything you cooked. The words landed harder than the shouting. Victor turned to the managers. No more plates leave this kitchen until I approve them. One manager went pale. Sir, the guests have already received the first course from this batch. Victor froze. How many? The manager hesitated. Nearly all of table 1 through table 6. Victor's eyes flashed. You served it? Marjorie answered before anyone else could point at Annie again. Yes. Without my approval, Chef Valmont was gone. Service had to continue. Victor gave her a look that promised consequences later. Then he pointed at Annie again. If one guest complains, if one investor pushes that plate away, if one person out there asks what amateur hour I am running on this vessel, it will be on you. Annie nodded once. Yes, sir. The words tasted like metal in her mouth. A server appeared at the swinging door, holding an empty plate. The server looked nervous, as if good news had become dangerous. Mr. Langford, she said carefully. Table 3 is asking who prepared the sea base. Victor's mouth tightened at once. There it is, he said, turning toward Annie and Marjorie. I warned you. Both of you will receive a punishment fit for this embarrassment. The server took a small breath, then lowered her voice. But sir, they liked it. They liked it very much. They said it was the best thing they've had all evening. Then Victor's face hardened further, because praise had arrived in the one form he could not accept. It had come through Annie. He stepped closer to the server and lowered his voice. Go back out there and tell them Chef Valmont prepared the menu. The server hesitated. But sir, now. She disappeared through the swinging door. Annie looked down at the pan. The sauce was still holding, barely. She reached for the handle again. Not because Victor had allowed it, but because the food still needed saving. Victor saw the movement. I told you to step away. Annie stopped. Marjorie said, Mr. Langford, if she doesn't finish that sauce, the next course won't go out. Then it doesn't go out. Sir, with respect, that will create a bigger problem. With respect, Victor said, turning the phrase into something sharp. You have already created one. Sam finally spoke. His voice was low, rough, and steady. Mr. Langford, that girl saved your dinner. Every head turned toward him. Victor looked almost amused. And you are? Samuel Whitaker. Prep cook. Then prep something and stay out of this. Sam did not move. I know panic when I see it. And I know skill when I see it. What she did wasn't luck. Annie's throat tightened. Mr. Sam, please. She did not want him punished for her. If this moment touched your heart, please like this video and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Your support means a lot to us. And if you want more emotional and inspiring stories like this, please subscribe to the channel. Victor smiled at that. At least, she understands danger. He looked once more at Annie's name tag. Annie the kitchen service assistant, he said. Remember that title, because after tonight, if I decide to be generous, it may be the only kitchen title you ever have. Annie stood very still. Then she thought of the food. She drew a slow breath. Sir, she said, still quiet, you can fire me after service, but if I step away now, your guests will know something is wrong. Victor's eyes narrowed again. Annie kept going before fear could take the words back. You don't have to trust me, but you should trust the plates coming back clean. For the first time since he entered, Victor had no immediate answer. The kitchen held its breath, and somewhere beyond the swinging doors, another empty plate came back. The server who carried it was older. A woman named Denise said, Table 5 is asking for the sauce on the side. Victor's jaw flexed. Why? Denise swallowed. They want more of it. He stepped back, adjusting the cuff of his white jacket as if touching expensive fabric could restore order. You have until the next complaint, he said. One complaint. And she is off this vessel before dessert. Marjorie nodded once. Understood. No, Victor said. I want to hear it from her. Annie lifted her eyes. One complaint, he said, and you are done. Do you understand? Yes, sir. And you will not speak to guests. You will not let anyone know you touched that plate. You will finish what you started. If you can. And then you will return to whatever corner of this kitchen you came from. Sam's hands tightened on the prep table. Marjorie's face stayed still. But Annie saw the anger move through her shoulders. Annie said, "Yes, sir." Victor looked disappointed that she had not given him another reason to strike. He turned to leave, then stopped at the door. "And Marjorie?" "Yes, Mr. Langford. When this is over, you and I will discuss your judgment." Marjorie met his eyes. "I expected that." He left through the service corridor with the two managers trailing behind him. Then Marjorie turned sharply toward the line. "You heard the terms. We don't give him a complaint. Trevor, refire 2 sea bass, and this time don't salt them like you're curing ham. Denise, tell service we need 90 seconds before the next pickup. Sam, I need clean towels and hot plates." Sam nodded. Already moving. Marjorie looked at Annie, her voice lowered. "Can you finish the sauce?" Annie did not answer with confidence she did not feel. She looked at the pan, smelled the butter, watched the edge of the foam, then said, "Yes." Marjorie stepped aside. "Then finish it." Denise returned to the dining room, where table 3 had not stopped talking about the sea base. At the center of that table sat Harold Bennett. 70 years old, silver-haired, narrow-shouldered, and famous in the one way that made chefs more nervous. He is the food critic. He waited until Denise passed behind his chair, then lifted one hand. "Miss," he said. Denise stopped. "Yes, sir? Who made this?" "The menu is Chef Valmont's," she said carefully. "That is not what I asked." Denise went still. Harold's gaze did not leave the plate. "If you don't mind, may I meet the person who cooked this dish?" Victor noticed Harold speaking to the server. The smile on Victor's face changed at once. He knew Harold Bennett. "Mr. Bennett," Victor said warmly, "is there something I can assist you with? Is there a problem with the food?" Harold looked up at him. "Is this dish truly Chef Valmont's?" he asked. "I would like to meet him right now." Victor's smile held, but only barely. For the first time that night, the question did not sound like praise. It sounded like trouble. Victor kept his smile fixed the way a man keeps one hand on a locked door. "Chef Valmont is occupied with service at the moment," he said. "You know how these kitchens are, Harold. Timing is everything." Harold Bennett did not smile back. "Timing is exactly why I'm asking." The senator beside Victor leaned slightly forward, sensing the change in the air. Around table 3, conversation thinned. A woman with diamond earrings lowered her fork. A retired judge who had spent most of dinner talking about golf sat back and watched Harold's face. Victor gave a small laugh meant for the table. "Well, I'm glad the dish pleased you. Chef Valmont will be delighted to hear it." "I didn't say it pleased me," Harold said. Victor's smile weakened. Harold touched the edge of the plate with one finger, careful not to disturb the last streak of sauce. "I said I wanted to meet the person who cooked it." Denise stood 2 steps away, still holding her tray against her vest. She had worked enough banquets to know when a rich man wanted a servant to disappear. She also knew when an older gentleman was asking a question because he already suspected the answer. Victor turned to her. "Denise, please inform the kitchen that Mr. Bennett sends his compliments to Chef Valmont." Harold's eyes moved to Denise. "No. Please inform the kitchen that I would like to speak to the cook responsible for this plate." The word cook landed plainly, without glamour, without insult. Somehow that made it harder for Victor to twist. "Of course," Victor said before Denise could answer. "I'll handle it personally." He placed a light hand on Harold's shoulder. Harold looked at the hand until Victor removed it. "I'll be right back," Victor said. He walked away with measured steps, but by the time he reached the corridor, the smile was gone. He pushed through the service door hard enough that it slapped the wall. In the kitchen, Annie was finishing the second round of plates. Her face was damp from heat. A loose curl had escaped beneath her cap. She worked beside Marjorie, not above her, not as though she had taken anything from anyone, but with a focus that made the line follow her without being told twice. "2 sea bass walking," Marjorie called. "Sauce after the fish lands," Annie said. "Not before." Trevor slid a pan forward. "This one good?" Annie leaned close, not touching it, just listening to the butter. 30 seconds, then pull it. Trevor did not argue. Sam saw Victor enter first. His shoulders lowered a fraction, like a man bracing before a hard wind. Victor looked from Annie to Marjorie. "You two have created a problem." Marjorie set down her towel. Has someone complained? That is not the point. It is exactly the point, Marjorie said. You said one complaint. Victor stepped closer. Harold Bennett wants to meet the cook. The name moved through the kitchen. Even the dishwashers knew it. Harold Bennett was not a television clown or a social media critic who threw adjectives around for applause. He was old school. He had written about food when newspapers still had Sunday sections thick enough to hold with both hands. Chefs framed his praise and feared his silence. Annie's hand stopped above the spoon. Victor noticed. You know the name? No, sir, she said too quickly. Sam looked at her. Victor studied her face. Good. Then you will remain quiet. Marjorie frowned. If he asked for the cook, then Annie should go. No, Victor said. Chef Valmont made the menu. Chef Valmont receives the compliment. He's in emergency care. Then you will say he is unavailable. Harold Bennett appeared at the kitchen doorway before Victor could finish. Denise stood behind him, nervous but not sorry. I've heard that already, Harold said. Victor turned. Mr. Bennett, this is a working kitchen. For safety reasons, guests aren't allowed back here. I spent 40 years walking into kitchens dirtier, smaller, and more honest than this one, Harold said. I'll stay by the door. No one moved. Harold's gaze traveled across the line, past Marjorie, past Sam, past Trevor, and stopped on Annie. She lowered her eyes. That old habit returned before she could stop it. Don't draw attention. Don't invite questions. Finish the work and leave no fingerprints on the room. But Harold kept looking. You, he said gently. Did you finish the sea bass? Annie's mouth went dry. Victor answered for her. She assisted under supervision. Harold did not look at him. I asked her. Annie felt Marjorie beside her, solid and quiet. Sam stood a few feet away, wiping his hands on a towel that was already clean. Yes, sir, Annie said. I finished it. Harold nodded once, as if something inside him had clicked into place. The pepper vinegar. Whose idea was that? Annie hesitated. Victor cut in. It's a standard Southern accent, nothing unusual. Harold's eyes stayed on Annie. It wasn't used like an accent. It was used like punctuation. Annie looked up then, just a little. My grandmother used it that way, she said. The kitchen seemed to shrink around the sentence. Harold's face changed. Not dramatically. His brows drew together, and something behind his eyes went back in time. Your grandmother was from where? Annie's fingers tightened around the spoon. Charleston. Nama? She did not answer. Victor gave an impatient laugh. Harold, surely we don't need a family history over a fish course. Harold ignored him. What's your name, young lady? Annie touched the edge of her apron near the badge, not covering it this time, only feeling the small plastic rectangle against the cloth. Annie Carter. Harold repeated it softly. Annie Carter. Nothing in the name gave her away, not fully, but the way she said Charleston, the way she held back, the way the pepper vinegar had opened the brown butter like a door, it was enough to disturb a memory he had kept for 2 years. He looked at her hands. They were clean, careful hands. Young hands, but not uncertain. There was a faint scar near her thumb, the kind cooks earned without telling stories about it. Have you ever competed? He asked. Annie's eyes dropped again. Victor's head turned toward her. Competed? No, sir, Annie said. The lie was small and painful. Harold heard it anyway. 2 years earlier, in a hall in Atlanta filled with young chefs from 12 countries, he had tasted a dish that made the judges stop speaking. It had not been the fanciest plate that day. No tower of tweezed herbs, no smoke trapped under glass, no trick meant to make old men clap. It had been roasted corn broth with blue crab, brown butter, pepper vinegar, and something Harold could only describe later as grief made useful. The contestant had signed only 2 letters. AC, no photograph, no interview, no acceptance speech. The award had been announced, the check unclaimed for 3 days, and then the winner vanished. Since then, Harold had asked chefs in New Orleans, Charleston, Savannah, Chicago, and New York if they knew who AC was. Some claimed they did. None of them cooked like that. Now an 18-year-old kitchen service assistant on a billionaire's yacht had given him that same closing note of pepper vinegar and memory. Harold looked at Annie again. Do the letters AC mean anything to you? Annie went still. Sam saw it. Marjorie saw it. Victor saw it too, though he did not yet understand what he was seeing. Annie forced herself to breathe. In her pocket, beneath the fold of her apron, she could feel the corner of the old handkerchief her grandmother had embroidered. A.C. in blue thread, worn thin from years of washing. "No, sir," she said. Harold's voice softened. "Child, I'm not trying to take anything from you." The word child should have sounded like the way Victor used it. Smaller. Dismissive. But from Harold, it carried age, concern, and a kind of patience Annie had not expected. Victor stepped between them. "That's enough. Mr. Bennett, I appreciate your enthusiasm, but this young woman is part of kitchen service. She is not some hidden celebrity." "No," Harold said. "I don't think she is a celebrity." Victor relaxed for half a second. Then Harold added, "I think she may be something rarer." Annie looked toward the stove. Another pan needed attention. The next plates would not wait for old secrets. That had always been the mercy of food. It gave you something to do when the past came too close. "Excuse me," she said. Victor blocked her. "You will answer, when spoken to." Annie raised her eyes. "The fish will overcook." Marjorie moved at once. "Let her work." Victor turned sharply. "I gave no such permission." Harold looked at the plate in his hand, then at Victor. "Mr. Langford, the best thing served on your yacht tonight is standing 3 feet from you, trying to keep it from burning." A wise host would step aside. No one had spoken to Victor that way all evening. For a moment, all the wealth on the Aurelia seemed to gather behind his face, waiting for him to crush the insult. But Harold Bennett was not an employee. He was not a server, not a prep cook, not a girl with a name tag Victor could threaten. He was a guest Victor needed, a man whose opinion mattered to the very people outside writing checks. Victor stepped aside. Annie returned to the stove. She lifted the pan, tilted it, and spooned butter over the fish with a motion so smooth Harold's breath caught. Not because it was flashy, because it was familiar. He looked at Marjorie. "How long has she worked here?" 3 months, Marjorie said. "In what position?" "Kitchen service assistant." Harold gave a sad little nod. "Of course." Victor heard judgment in those 2 words. "Meaning?" Harold did not answer him. He watched Annie finish the plate, wipe the rim, and send it out without looking for praise. Then he said, mostly to himself, "We spent 2 years looking in the wrong rooms." Annie's hand paused. Victor's face tightened. "Looking for whom?" Harold's eyes remained on Annie. "For AC," he said. "The young chef who disappeared." Victor stared at Harold as if the old man had spoken a language no one on the yacht was supposed to understand. "AC," he said. "What is that supposed to mean?" Harold did not answer him right away. He was watching Annie, and Annie was trying very hard to keep her hands moving. She placed the finished fish on the plate, checked the sauce, wiped the rim with the corner of a clean towel, and nodded for Denise to take it. She did each step carefully, but the room had changed around her. Every breath seemed louder. Every glance felt like a hand reaching for the pocket where she kept her grandmother's handkerchief. Victor turned toward Marjorie. "Is this some kind of stunt?" "No, Mr. Langford," Marjorie said. "Then why is my guest talking about a missing chef in my kitchen?" Harold stepped farther inside, close enough now that Annie could see the fine lines around his eyes and the careful way he carried his age. He was not fragile. He was old in the way old oak is old, slower maybe, but not weak. 2 years ago, Harold said, there was an international young chef competition in Atlanta. The winner entered under the initials AC. No photograph, no interviews, no sponsor, no restaurant behind them, just 4 dishes and a handwritten note that said the food was for Grace. Annie's spoon hit the side of the pan. The sound was small, but everyone heard it. Harold's voice softened. "That was your grandmother's name, wasn't it?" Annie closed her eyes for 1 second, not long enough to escape. Just long enough to see the kitchen in Charleston. The old yellow curtains. The cracked wooden table. Her grandmother's hands pressing dough flat with a bottle because the rolling pin had broken years ago. The radio on low. Gospel on Sundays. Blues when Grace was tired. Silence when the bills came. "Annie," Sam said gently. She opened her eyes. Victor looked from Harold to Annie. The irritation on his face began to mix with unease. He did not like puzzles unless he owned the answer. Harold continued. The final dish was roasted corn broth, blue crab, brown butter, pepper vinegar, and peach skin oil. It should not have worked. It did. It tasted like somebody had taken a whole southern childhood and taught it restraint. Marjorie looked at Annie as if seeing her for the first time. Trevor, who had spent 3 months calling her kid, stood with a towel in one hand and nothing to say. Victor gave a sharp laugh. You think this girl is that person? I don't think, Harold said. I remember. Annie turned away from the stove. Mr. Bennett, please. The use of his name confirmed more than denial could have hidden. Harold nodded once, not triumphantly, but with a kind of sorrow. So you do know me. Annie swallowed. I know who you are, and you know why I've been looking for AC. I didn't ask anyone to look. No, he said. You disappeared before anyone could. Victor stepped between them again. Enough. I will not have my kitchen turned into some sentimental theater. Harold's eyes moved slowly to him. The theater began when you told a young woman you couldn't swallow anything she cooked, then tried to take credit when your guests praised it. Victor's face flushed. Annie spoke quickly, not for Victor, but because the room was tilting too far toward exposure. I need to finish service. Harold looked at the waiting plates, then stepped aside. Then finish. Marjorie found her voice. Line up. 4 plates. Trevor, don't touch the sauce. Sam, warm plates. Denise, hold service until I call. The kitchen moved again, but not like before. Before, people moved around Annie. Now they moved with her. No one said it out loud. No one had to. They made space for her hands. Annie worked because work was the only place she could put her fear. She basted fish, adjusted the puree, added a thin line of pepper vinegar, placed herbs with care but not fuss. Every plate left her station clean, balanced, exact. Yet inside her chest, Charleston was rising. She remembered Grace Carter standing at the stove in a house that always smelled of cornmeal, onions, and old wood. Grace had not owned much, but she fed people like abundance was a decision. A neighbor lost her husband. Grace made chicken and rice. A boy came home from jail. Grace made peach hand pies and told the church ladies to mind their own business. A young mother ran short before payday. Grace sent Annie over with a pot wrapped in towels and said, "Don't make her thank you twice. Hunger already makes folks bow enough. Food was not a trophy, baby. Food is a hand reaching across a table." That was what Grace had taught her. That was why Annie had entered the competition under initials. AC had never been a brand. It was 2 blue letters stitched on a handkerchief by an old woman who believed gifts were meant to serve, not perform. After Annie won, calls came. Emails. Messages from people who did not know her but already wanted pieces of her. A morning show wanted tears. A sponsor wanted her story. A restaurant group wanted to build a young black prodigy concept around her face. Her grandmother, her poverty, her grief. Grace had been dying by then, her breath thin, her hands still warm. "Promise me," Grace had whispered. "Don't let them dress your gift up and sell it back to you." So Annie promised. She vanished. She took work where no one would search for genius. Hotel prep rooms, catering kitchens, finally the Aurelia, where rich people rarely looked below the line unless something went wrong. Now something had gone very wrong. Victor turned to Harold, voice controlled but tight. "Let's assume, for a moment, that you're right. What exactly do you expect me to do? Stop my gala and announce that a kitchen assistant secretly cooked the meal?" "No," Harold said. "I expect you to stop lying about it." Victor smiled without warmth. "You are a guest on my yacht, and you are a host serving food you did not have the decency to respect." Marjorie looked down, hiding the smallest flicker of satisfaction. Victor saw it anyway. "Careful, Marjorie." Annie placed another plate on the pass. "Order up." Denise took it, but Harold gently touched her arm. "Take me back to my table, please. I've heard enough for now." Victor's head snapped toward him. "For now?" Harold looked at Annie one last time. "I won't say anything in that room unless you choose to." Annie did not know what to do with that kindness. It was almost harder than cruelty. Cruelty had rules. Kindness asked you to trust. "Thank you," she said. Harold lowered his voice. "But child, hiding from the wrong people does not always protect the right ones." Sam's eyes moved toward Annie. It was nearly the same thing he had told her once. But coming from Harold, it carried a different weight. Not command. Warning. Harold left with Denise. Victor stayed. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he stepped close enough for only Annie and Marjorie to hear. "Whatever he thinks he knows," Victor said, It stays in this kitchen. My guests came here for the Langford Ocean Charity Gala, not for a fairy tale about a girl with a secret. Annie kept her eyes on the stove. Victor continued, "You will finish service. You will keep your head down. You will not speak to Mr. Bennett, the press, my donors, or anyone else unless I allow it. Is that clear?" Marjorie said. "Mr. Langford?" I asked her. Annie turned the flame down beneath the pan. "Yes, sir," she said. Victor studied her, as if trying to decide whether fear had taken hold. It had, but not in the way he wanted. He left again, slower this time. The kitchen resumed, yet the old order had cracked. Trevor no longer barked at Annie. The young staff member who had blamed her would not meet her eyes. Marjorie gave instructions, but when a question involved flavor, people looked to Annie before they could stop themselves. Sam came beside her with a tray of clean plates. "You all right?" he asked. "No. That's honest." She wiped sauce from the rim of a plate. "I broke my promise." Sam shook his head. "Sounds to me like the world broke in and found you." Annie's fingers brushed the pocket where the handkerchief rested. "I wasn't supposed to cook for attention." "You're not," Sam said. "You're cooking because people need feeding and because a proud man tried to make you ashamed of what God gave you." Annie looked at him then, and for a moment, she was not on a yacht off Miami. She was back in Charleston, standing beside Grace, watching an old woman feed a room full of people who had no idea they were being loved. Marjorie called from the pass. "Annie, I need the next sauce." Annie drew a breath and turned back to the stove. Outside, Harold Bennett returned to table 3 and sat without touching his wine. Victor stood across the room, laughing too loudly beside a senator. Denise moved between tables with careful steps, and under the deck, in the heat of the kitchen, Annie Carter kept cooking while the name AC waited in the air like a match not yet struck. By the time the next course left the kitchen, Annie's name was moving through the Aurelia in whispers, not loudly, not yet. On yachts like Victor Langford's, rumors wore polished shoes and lowered their voices near donors. Still, they traveled. From Denise to another server. From a server to the bartender on the upper deck. From the bartender to a woman in a navy gown who had once hosted a public television cooking special. From table 3 to table 6, people began asking the same careful question. Who finished the sea bass? Victor saw it happening and hated the shape of it. He stood near the center of the dining room with a glass of sparkling water in his hand, smiling for investors while watching Harold Bennett from the corner of his eye. Harold was not eating much now. He sat with both hands folded near his plate, patient and still, like a man waiting for a door to open by itself. Senator Reeves touched Victor's arm. That first course was impressive. Valmont outdid himself. Victor smiled. He's one of the best. Is he coming out later? I'd love to compliment him. We'll see how service goes, Victor said. The senator nodded, but her eyes moved toward Harold. Mr. Bennett seems especially interested. Victor's fingers tightened around his glass. Harold is always interested in something. Below deck, Annie tried not to think about any of it. The kitchen had settled into a rhythm, but it was not peace. It was the rhythm of people working beside a storm they knew might return. Marjorie called orders. Sam moved hot plates. Denise came and went with the timing of someone who understood both rooms, the one where guests smiled over wine, and the one where workers swallowed fear because rent was due on Friday. Annie tasted the shrimp broth from a spoon, then set it down. It needs char. Trevor paused. Char? The corn. It's too sweet. Burn the edges, not the kernels through. We need smoke, not ash. He stared at her for half a second, then grabbed the pan. Yes, chef. The words slipped out before he could stop them. The kitchen heard it. Annie heard it too. Her shoulders stiffened, but she did not correct him. Marjorie looked down at her clipboard to hide whatever crossed her face. Sam only reached for another stack of bowls. The broth went out in shallow white dishes, each one carrying shrimp, charred corn, basil oil, and a faint onion sweetness that came late. Annie watched the servers lift the trays and disappear through the swinging door. For a moment, she imagined the bowls traveling through the narrow corridor, past the champagne station, into the polished room above. She imagined the guests leaning over them, not knowing a girl in the back was holding her breath. You're doing fine, Sam said. I'm not worried about the food. I know. Annie looked at him. He's going to make Marjorie pay for this. Marjorie knew that when she backed you. She shouldn't have had to. Sam slid a towel toward her. Most decent things shouldn't have to cost somebody. doesn't mean they come free. Annie wiped the edge of a bowl. The words stayed with her because they sounded like something Grace would have said while counting coins for the light bill. A server rushed in. Table 4 wants to know what's in the broth. Marjorie answered. Charred corn, shrimp, basil oil, sweet onion. They asked who made it. Victor's order hung over the line. Marjorie said, "Tell them the kitchen prepared it." The server nodded and left. Annie did not look up. But Sam saw the hurt flash across her face. Not because she wanted applause. Applause had always scared her, but there was a difference between hiding by choice and being erased by someone else. In the dining room, Harold tasted the broth and closed his eyes. There it was again. Not the same dish, but the same hand. Restraint. Memory. Acid placed not to impress, but to wake something asleep. He thought of the competition in Atlanta, of 3 judges sitting in silence over a bowl of corn and crab, of a handwritten note folded beside the plate. For Grace. No last name. No explanation. He turned to Denise when she passed. Did the same young woman cook this? Denise pressed her lips together. Victor appeared before she could answer. Harold, you'll have to forgive the staff. They've been instructed not to interrupt service with kitchen gossip. Harold looked up. Kitchen gossip built American cuisine. Victor laughed too loudly. You always did have a way with a line. I'm not making a line. I'm asking a question. And I'm telling you dinner is under control. Harold studied him. Is it? Victor's face held, but the skin near his temple pulsed. Enjoy the gala, Harold. He moved away before Harold could answer. Near the stage, Maya Brooks stood beside a display board showing smiling students in white culinary coats. Her own face was on the board, though the photo had been taken months ago at a scholarship orientation where no one had mentioned that the promised stipend would be delayed again. She had spent the evening thanking donors who did not know her name and nodding while Victor praised opportunity. She had seen him enter the kitchen earlier. She had heard some of the shouting through the service corridor. Now she watched servers carry out food people praised in low, surprised voices. And she wondered who was really feeding the room. Denise passed near her with an empty tray. "Ma'am," Maya said, then corrected herself because Denise was working and she felt awkward asking. "I'm sorry. Do you know if the chef is okay?" "Chef Valmont?" "Yes. He's with the medics. Breathing, last I heard." Maya nodded. "And the girl in the kitchen?" Denise stopped. "You saw that?" "A little." Denise glanced toward Victor, then lowered her voice. "She's still standing." Maya looked toward the service door. "Good." Denise gave her a sad half-smile. Standing can be expensive. Back in the kitchen, Annie was working on the grouper. The fish had to carry more weight than the sea bass. It needed smoke, heat, greens, and brightness, something strong enough to follow the broth without turning heavy. She rubbed the spice onto the fish with gloved hands, gentle but firm, then paused when she smelled the collard puree. "Too much cream," she said. Trevor looked offended, then remembered the sea bass. "What do you want?" "Lemon zest. A little pot liquor if there's any left from the greens, and salt after, not before." Marjorie nodded to a cook. "Do it." For a while, the work took over. Annie loved that about kitchens when they were honest. A task did not care how old you were. A flame did not care what someone called you. The pan either responded or it did not. The sauce held or broke. The fish cooked or died. In that truth, she could breathe. Then Victor returned. This time he did not come alone. He brought one of the managers and a woman from his public relations team, a sleek young professional named Claire, who wore a headset, and the expression of someone paid to stop disasters before cameras found them. Victor stood just inside the kitchen. New instruction. If anyone asks, Chef Valmont designed every dish. Marjorie supervised execution, and the staff performed as trained. Marjorie's eyes narrowed. That's not accurate. It is clean. It's false. It is necessary. Claire stepped in, softer. Marjorie, no one is trying to diminish anyone. We just need consistent messaging until we understand what happened. Sam muttered. Funny how truth always has to wait until rich folks understand it. Victor turned. Did you say something? Sam looked at him. No, sir. Annie kept her head down and placed the grouper in the pan. The spice bloomed as it hit heat. Paprika, pepper, smoke, salt. The smell filled the kitchen and cut through the tension. Victor looked at her hands. She is not to be seen by guests. Claire glanced at Annie, then at Victor. Is there a concern she might speak? There is a concern she might be mistaken for someone in charge. Annie's hand slowed for less than a second. Marjorie said, she is in charge of that station. Not officially. Officially doesn't cook fish. Claire took a careful breath. Mr. Langford. Mr. Bennett has influence. If he keeps asking questions, refusing him may look worse. Victor's eyes flashed. Then distract him. Seat him beside the senator. Pour better wine. I don't care. He doesn't drink much, Claire said. Then find something he does. Victor left again, and Claire followed after one last worried look at the line. The grouper went out. 10 minutes later, the plates began coming back clean, not all at once. One by one. Then several. Denise carried 2 in, stacked carefully. Table 2 wants to know if there will be a printed recipe. No, Marjorie said. Table 6 asked if the chef has a restaurant. No, Annie said before she could stop herself. Denise looked at her. What should I tell them? Annie opened her mouth, but no answer came. She had spent 2 years making sure there was no restaurant, no page, no face, no story for people to buy. Marjorie said, tell them the chef is busy. Denise nodded. Sam came beside Annie. That answer won't hold forever. It only has to hold tonight. You sure about that? Annie did not reply. In the dining room, Harold Bennett set down his fork after the grouper and reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He pulled out a small leather notebook, the same one he had carried since his wife gave it to him 20 years earlier. He did not write reviews at the table anymore unless something mattered. Most meals could wait. This one could not. He wrote 3 letters. J. Then, beneath them, Charleston, Grace, pepper vinegar, young, hiding. Across the room, Victor saw the notebook. His face changed. Maya saw it too. She watched Victor watch Harold, and she understood something with the sharpness young people sometimes have before adults teach them to doubt themselves. The important man was not afraid of bad food. He was afraid of the truth about good food. Below deck, Annie placed the last grouper of the course on the pass. Her feet ached. Her arms were tired. Her heart had not slowed since Victor first shouted at her. But the plate was clean. The sauce was right. The fish would hold. Marjorie looked at it and said quietly, send it. Denise lifted the plate. Before she left, she leaned close enough that only Annie could hear. Mr. Bennett is writing in his notebook. Annie went cold. Sam saw her face. What is it? Annie touched the pocket where the handkerchief lay folded. That's how it started last time, she said. Sam did not ask what last time meant. Not yet. He only looked toward the swinging doors, where the noise of the gala rose and fell like water against the hull, and said, then I suppose last time just found its way back. Annie did not move for a moment. The kitchen kept working around her, but the sound had thinned, as if she were hearing it through water. Mr. Bennett is writing in his notebook. Those words carried her back 2 years, to a convention hall in Atlanta where judges sat under bright lights and servers carried plates with numbers instead of names. Back then, she had been 17, standing behind a black curtain with her grandmother's handkerchief pressed in her fist, listening while strangers tasted the food Grace had taught her to make. She had not wanted a trophy. She had wanted one person in that room to understand what her grandmother meant when she said food could hold a life without explaining it. Sam set a clean tray beside her. Annie. She blinked and came back to the heat of the Aurelia's kitchen. I'm here. You drifted. I know. You need a minute? No. She looked at the next order on the rail. I need short ribs glazed and resting in 4. Marjorie watched her from the pass. You sure? Annie nodded. She was not sure of anything except the food, and maybe that had always been enough to keep her standing. She reached for the sorghum glaze, tasted it with a clean spoon, then frowned. Too sweet. Trevor had been reaching for a towel. He stopped. I followed Chef Valmont's recipe. I know. It's still too sweet. Marjorie said, fix it. Annie added coffee reduction, smoked salt, and a narrow splash of vinegar. She stirred, waited, tasted again, then nodded. Now it has a spine. Trevor looked at the pot. A spine? Sam gave him a dry look. Means it can stand up straight, son. For the first time all night. One of the dishwashers laughed under his breath. It was small and quick, but it loosened something. Annie almost smiled, then remembered the notebook, Victor, Harold, A.C., and the handkerchief in her pocket. Upstairs, Victor Langford had stopped pretending not to watch Harold Bennett. He was still moving among guests, still touching shoulders, still laughing when investors made jokes that were not funny. But his eyes kept finding the old critic at table 3. Harold had not written much, only a few lines, but that was enough. Victor knew men like Harold did not fill notebooks with compliments. They recorded evidence. Claire, the public relations director, joined Victor near the bar. "We need to talk." "Not now." "Now," she said quietly. Harold Bennett asked Denise whether Chef Valmont is actually on board. Victor turned his head slowly. "What did she say?" "She said he was unavailable." "Good." "No, not good." He then asked the senator if she had met Valmont tonight. She said no. Victor's face tightened. "Keep the senator away from him." Claire looked at him as if he had suggested moving the moon. "She's a United States senator, Victor. I don't assign her seating like a child. You are paid to manage perception. And perception is becoming that you lied about the chef." Victor leaned closer. "Then create a better perception." Claire looked past him toward the service door. "The better perception may be the truth. A young kitchen worker stepped in during an emergency and saved the meal. That is not a scandal unless you make it one." Victor's smile vanished. "The story tonight is my foundation. The story is moving." "Then stop it." Claire said nothing for a second. She had worked for rich men before. Most of them believed public relations meant turning reality into furniture and arranging it around their ego. Victor was worse because he called it charity. Before she could answer, Maya Brooks approached, with both hands clasped in front of her borrowed blue dress. "Mr. Langford?" Victor put his smile back on so quickly it looked painful. "Maya. There you are. Having a good evening?" "Yes, sir. I wanted to ask about the scholarship announcement. My school director said maybe tonight there would be news about the stipends." Claire's expression shifted. Victor's smile did not. "We'll discuss all of that at the proper time." "Yes, sir. It's just some of us still haven't received the equipment vouchers, and classes start next month." Victor's voice stayed pleasant. "These things take processing." Maya nodded, embarrassed at once for having asked. "Of course. I'm sorry. No need to apologize," Victor said, already looking beyond her. "Enjoy the dinner." Maya stepped back. Claire watched her go, then looked at Victor. "That is the girl from the brochure. I know who she is. Do you?" Victor's eyes cooled. "Careful." Below deck, Annie plated the short ribs. The meat was tender, the glaze dark and glossy, the smoked salt cutting through the sweetness. She added a small spoon of collard green puree beside it. Not enough to crowd the plate, just enough to bring the dish back to earth. It was not Chef Valmont's style anymore. His menu had been elegant and empty, built to impress from a distance. Annie's changes made the food warmer, riskier, more American in the way older guests understood without needing it explained. Coffee from early mornings, greens from Sunday tables, sweetness checked by bitterness, richness saved by acid. Denise came for the pickup. "Table 3 is waiting." "Everyone is waiting," Marjorie said. Denise looked at Annie. He asked again. Annie already knew who he meant. "What did he ask?" "If you were from Charleston." Sam's head lifted. Annie wiped the rim of the last plate too carefully. "What did you say?" "I said I didn't know." "Thank you." Denise did not leave right away. "Honey, he doesn't seem like he wants to hurt you." Annie gave a small nod. Most people don't think they do. Denise accepted that because she was old enough to know it was true. She lifted the tray and went out. Marjorie moved beside Annie. "AC means something." Annie looked at the empty space where the plates had been. "It used to. Does it mean you're in trouble?" Annie gave a tired breath. "It means people may start asking questions I promised someone I wouldn't answer." Marjorie softened, just a little. "Your grandmother?" Annie turned to her. Marjorie shrugged. "Harold said the food was for Grace. You looked like somebody opened a locked drawer." Annie put the spoon down. "She raised me. She taught me everything. Before she died, I promised her I wouldn't let people turn my cooking into a costume." Sam nodded slowly. "That sounds like a woman who knew the world." "She did," Annie said. "She knew people could love your gift and still not respect you. No one had an easy answer to that." Upstairs, Harold tasted the short rib, and set down his fork before the others at his table had finished their first bite. He was no longer wondering. The question mark in his notebook felt foolish now. This was AC, not because the dishes matched, but because they thought the same way. Whoever cooked them understood that food could carry hardship without begging for pity. Senator Reeves leaned over. "Harold, you look like you've seen a ghost." In a manner of speaking. "Should I be worried about the food?" "No," Harold said. "You should be worried about why no one wants to tell us who made it." The senator's smile faded. At the next table, a real estate investor named Paul Dryden had overheard enough to lean in. "Is there some issue?" Harold closed his notebook. "Not with the cooking." Victor arrived before the conversation could grow. "Everything all right here?" Harold looked up. "Where is Chef Valmont?" "As I said, occupied." "With what?" Victor's smile held. "Kitchen matters." Harold nodded toward the service corridor. "Then I'll wait." "That won't be necessary." "I disagree." The senator folded her hands. "Victor, if Harold wants to compliment the chef, why not let him?" Victor's answer came half a beat too late. "Because service is still underway," Harold said. "Then bring the cook when service ends." Victor's jaw worked. Of course, but he had no intention of doing that. He left the table and walked straight to the service corridor. This time he did not shout when he entered the kitchen. The quiet was worse. "Annie," he said. She turned. "You are finished after the dessert course. Then you will leave through the crew exit. No conversations. No photographs. No speaking to Harold Bennett." Marjorie stepped forward. "That's not reasonable." Victor did not look at her. "It is an instruction." Annie's pulse was loud in her ears. "Mr. Bennett asked to speak with the cook." Victor's eyes narrowed. "You heard me." Sam spoke from the prep table. "A man asks a fair question. You might give him a fair answer." Victor turned on him. "You are very close to joining her at the dock." Sam held his gaze. "Been put off nicer boats by worse men." Annie whispered, "Mr. Sam." Victor took one step toward Sam, then stopped. He could not afford another scene, not with Harold already watching. Instead, he looked back at Annie. "You think tonight is about you," he said. "No, sir," Annie answered. "I think tonight was supposed to be about feeding people. Tonight is about commitments, donors, investors, a foundation that helps children like you find opportunity." The words struck Annie differently because she had seen Maya upstairs, standing beside her own picture like a guest at someone else's life. "Children like me?" Annie asked. Victor's mouth tightened. "Ambitious children. Difficult children. Children who need guidance." Annie thought of Grace, of hands dusted with flour, of a woman who never called hunger a branding opportunity. She said nothing. Victor leaned close enough that only she could hear. "You may have fooled Harold Bennett with pepper vinegar and a sob story, but you will not hijack my gala." Annie's eyes lifted. "I never told him a story." "No," Victor said. "That's the problem. People are writing one for you." He walked out before anyone could answer. The kitchen remained silent until Marjorie exhaled. "Dessert course, in 15. Annie touched the handkerchief in her pocket. Sam came beside her. "You don't owe that man your silence." Annie looked toward the door Victor had used. "I don't know what I owe anymore." Sam's voice softened. "Start with the food. Truth can wait a few more minutes, but it won't wait forever." Annie nodded, though her hands felt colder than they should have in a kitchen this hot. Then she reached for the peaches. The peaches were not fresh. Annie knew it the second she opened the container. They were good quality, peeled and packed in syrup, the kind a luxury kitchen kept for emergencies when fruit shipments came in bruised or late. Chef Valmont had planned a plated dessert with white chocolate mousse, pistachio dust, and a sugar sail, so delicate half the guests would photograph it before tasting it. It looked expensive. It said nothing. Annie looked at the peaches and thought of Charleston. Sam set a bowl beside her. "You all right?" "No," she said, "but I know what to make." Marjorie heard that and turned from the pass. "We still have Valmont's dessert components." "I know. You're changing the dessert?" Annie looked at the clock. "We don't have time to build his plates the way he wanted. The mousse hasn't set right. The sugar sails are soft from humidity. If we serve it, it'll look tired before it reaches table 3. Trevor opened his mouth, then closed it. By now, he had learned that arguing with Annie cost more time than listening. Marjorie watched her. "What do you need?" "Pie dough scraps, brown sugar, butter, sea salt." cream, cinnamon, and every small cast iron skillet we have. Hand pies? Sam asked. Annie nodded. Warm, not fancy. Marjorie studied her for a second. This crowd paid $10,000 a seat. Then they can afford to taste something honest. The words came out before Annie could dress them in politeness. For a moment, she expected Marjorie to correct her. Instead, the sous chef looked toward the trays of half-failed mousse, then back at the peaches. Trevor, Marjorie said, get the dough. Sam, skillets. Denise, Warren service dessert will be hot and staggered. Trevor moved. Sam moved faster. Annie drained the peaches, saving some syrup, then cut them smaller. She melted butter until it browned, added brown sugar, a pinch of salt, cinnamon, and just enough syrup to loosen it. The smell rose at once, warm and plain. And for the first time that night, the kitchen smelled less like a yacht and more like a home where someone had remembered you were coming. She tried not to let that hurt. Grace Carter had made peach hand pies on Sundays when the church basement was too hot and everybody still wore their good shoes because dignity did not depend on air conditioning. She made them after funerals, after bills, after hard phone calls from relatives who needed more than they could repay. She made them when Annie was small and angry that other children had mothers who came to school plays. You can be mad, Grace had said once, sealing dough with the back of a fork. Just don't let mad be the only thing you know how to feed. Annie pressed the dough closed now with that same fork motion. Her hands remembered what her mind tried not to touch. Across the kitchen, Maya appeared at the service doorway. She was not supposed to be there. She stood half hidden by the frame, still in her borrowed blue dress, her eyes moving from Annie to the line of trays. Denise must have let her come down, or maybe Maya had followed the smell. Marjorie saw her first. Dining room is upstairs. Maya stepped back. I'm sorry. I just wanted to see if she was okay. Annie looked up. The girl's voice was small, but not childish. She had the tired courtesy of young people who have learned not to take up space in rooms owned by others. I heard him, Maya said. Mr. Langford. Earlier. Annie wiped her hands. I'm fine. Maya did not believe her, but she nodded because sometimes people said fine when they meant don't make me fall apart. Sam pulled a stool from the wall. Stand there if you're staying, baby. Don't block service. Marjorie shot him a look, but she did not send Maya away. Maya watched Annie fill the dough. Are those peaches? Yes. My grandma used canned peaches, Maya said. She said fresh ones were for people with time. Annie almost smiled. My grandma said fresh ones were for people who had trees. Maya smiled then, just a little. It faded quickly. Mr. Langford told me the scholarship money takes processing. Annie's hands slowed. Sam looked up. Marjorie's face changed by half an inch, but Annie saw it. What scholarship? Annie asked. The Langford Hospitality Program. I'm in the brochure upstairs. Maya gave a small, embarrassed laugh. They keep showing my picture beside the words future leadership. I still haven't gotten the knife kit. Classes start next month. No one spoke for a moment. Maya rushed to soften it, as if she had done something rude by telling the truth. I'm sure it's just paperwork. Sam muttered. Paperwork sure does get lazy when poor kids are waiting. Marjorie said, Sam, but she did not sound angry. Annie folded another hand pie, pressing the edges tight. How many students are waiting? Maya looked down. A lot of us. Some got partial payments. Some didn't. They told us not to worry, because tonight would fix everything. Tonight. Annie thought of Victor smiling beside donors, talking about opportunity, while telling her that people in her position were not here to think. The peaches began to bubble in the pan. Denise returned through the door. Dessert status? 6 minutes, Annie said. Denise saw Maya and sighed. Girl, if they catch you down here, I'm sorry. Denise's face softened. Don't be sorry for wanting to know where the truth is being cooked. Annie looked at her. Denise shrugged. I'm old enough to say one thing. A night I might regret. A laugh moved quietly through the kitchen, then died when Victor's voice sounded in the corridor. He was speaking to Claire, low but sharp. I want Bennett handled before dessert. Seat him near the donors from Palm Beach. Keep him talking about the foundation, and find out who let that scholarship girl wander off. Maya went still. Claire answered, Victor, she's 17. She is part of the presentation. Presentations do not wander. Annie felt something inside her close, then open in a more dangerous way. Victor entered and stopped when he saw Maya. "There you are," he said. The smile appeared, polished and empty. "Maya, sweetheart. People upstairs are asking for you." Maya folded her hands. "Yes, sir." His gaze moved to Annie. "I see the kitchen is becoming a lounge." Marjorie stepped in. "She came to check on staff. She's leaving now." Victor's smile thinned. "I don't pay guests to check on staff." Maya flinched. Annie set down the fork. She asked a question. Victor turned to her. "And you are still forgetting your place." "No," Annie said. "I'm remembering it." The kitchen went quiet. Victor took one step toward her. "Careful." Annie felt Sam shift beside her. She did not want him stepping between them. Not again. She looked at Victor and kept her voice even. "My place is at the stove until dessert is finished. That was your instruction." For a second, Victor had to swallow his own order. He looked toward the trays of hand pies. "What is that?" "Dessert," Marjorie said. "That is not Valmont's dessert." Valmont's dessert failed. Victor's eyes snapped to Annie. "And this is your solution?" "Canned peaches and pastry," Annie said. "Warm peach hand pies with brown sugar cream and sea salt. At a formal gala?" "Yes, sir." He stared at her as if she had set a paper plate on the table. "Do you understand elegance at all?" Annie thought of Grace in her church dress, placing a pie in the hands of a widow who had not eaten since morning. She thought of old men removing hats before meals, of neighbors saying yes, ma'am, and no, sir, not because they were weak, but because manners were the last silver some families owned. "I understand when food means something," she said. Victor's jaw tightened. "Food means what I say it means on my yacht." Harold Bennett's voice came from behind him. "That may be your problem." Victor turned. Harold stood in the corridor entrance, one hand on the rail. Denise behind him looking like she had made peace with losing her job. He had followed the smell, or the questions, or both. "Mr. Bennett," Victor said. "This is becoming inappropriate." "I agree," Harold said. "A kitchen full of workers being bullied while feeding your donors is inappropriate." Claire appeared behind him, pale. "Mr. Langford, several guests are asking why dessert is delayed." "It isn't delayed," Annie said before Victor could answer. "It's 2 minutes out." Harold looked at the trays. "Peach?" "Yes, sir." "Hand piece?" "Yes, sir." A memory touched his face. "Grace again?" Annie did not answer. Maya looked between them. "Who's Grace?" Annie lifted one tray and slid it toward Sam. "Someone who knew how to feed people without making them feel small." Harold's eyes softened. Victor had had enough. "Dessert goes out under Valmont's name. The girl leaves after service. Bennett returns to his table. Maya returns upstairs. That is the end of this." No one moved. Then Marjorie said, "Dessert is ready." Sam lifted the first tray. Denise stepped forward. The servers gathered. Victor pointed at Annie. "Remember what I said. Not one word to my guests." Annie met his eyes. "I remember everything you said. It was not loud. It did not need to be." Denise took the tray through the swinging door. Maya followed after a moment. But before she left, she looked back at Annie. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not acting like I was invisible." Annie had no answer for that. She only watched the girl go. Harold remained at the doorway for one more breath. "AC," he said quietly, so only Annie and those closest could hear. "Some promises are kept by hiding, others are kept by standing where people can see what love taught you." Then he returned to the dining room. Annie touched the handkerchief in her pocket, the old blue letters pressed against her fingers. The dessert went out warm, and for the first time that night, Annie wondered if her grandmother's promise had not been broken at all, but misunderstood. The first hand pie reached table 3 still warm enough to fog the small pool of brown sugar cream beneath it. Harold Bennett did not touch it right away. He looked at it first, not as a critic looking for flaws, but as an old man trying to decide why something so simple had found its way into a room built to avoid simplicity. Around him, the gala went on with its low conversations, its polished laughter, its careful clinking of glasses. Victor stood near the stage, watching dessert land on each table as if every plate were a witness being called. Senator Reeves cut into her hand pie with the side of her fork. Steam rose, carrying peach, butter, cinnamon, and salt. She took one bite. then stopped talking in the middle of whatever she had been saying to the man beside her. Harold noticed. So did Victor. At table 5, a woman in pearls closed her eyes. At table 6, a retired banker who had complained about the temperature of his champagne took a second bite before asking what it was called. The servers answered carefully, "Warm peach hand pie with brown sugar cream." No one said Annie. No one said A, C. No one said the girl downstairs. Victor had forbidden it, but food had its own way of naming the person who made it. It carried where they came from, what they loved, what they refused to forget. Harold finally tasted his. For a moment, he was not on the Aurelia. He was in his mother's kitchen in Virginia in 1964, before he had become Harold Bennett, before restaurants cared what he thought, before food became columns and awards and knives laid at perfect angles. He was 10 years old, standing beside a window fan in August heat, watching his mother stretch canned peaches with biscuit dough because payday was 3 days away and 3 boys were hungry now. The pie had been uneven, the crust too thick in one corner. He had never forgotten it. This pie was not that pie. It was better made, more precise, touched with sea salt and a cream smooth enough for a gala. But the center of it was the same. Somebody had cooked from a place that knew how to make little feel like enough. Harold put down his fork. Across the room, Victor saw him reach for the leather notebook. "No," Victor said under his breath. Claire stood at his side. "Victor? Stop him. I can't stop a man from writing." Then distract him. "With what?" Victor looked toward Maya, who had returned to her place near the scholarship display. Her hands folded, her face too still. "Bring the girl to the stage." Now, Claire blinked. "Maya, she is the point of the evening. We remind everyone why they're here." Claire hesitated. "Victor, maybe we should wait." "For what? For Harold Bennett to turn my gala into a detective story?" He stepped toward the stage without waiting for her. A staff member dimmed the music when he lifted a hand. Conversation settled. Victor's public smile returned. Wide and generous. The smile printed on brochures and charity invitations. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said into the microphone, "I hope you are enjoying tonight's final course. Before we continue, I want to remind everyone what this evening is truly about." In the kitchen below, Annie heard his voice through the speaker mounted near the service station. She was wiping down the edge of the dessert pass. Her hands slowed. Marjorie looked up. Sam muttered, "Here we go." Victor continued, "The Langford Ocean Charity Gala exists to open doors for young people who might otherwise never get the chance to step into rooms like this." Annie felt the words turn in her stomach. "Tonight," Victor said, "we are honored to have with us one of those bright young faces, Maya Brooks. Would you come up here, please?" In the dining room, Maya froze. People began clapping before she moved, because clapping was what people did when a man with a microphone told them a moment was meaningful. Claire came to her side and whispered, "Just stand with him for a minute." Maya walked up slowly. Victor placed a hand on her shoulder the way he had done earlier for photographs. "Possessive, practiced, heavy, Maya represents the future," he said. "A hard-working young woman with a dream. Proof that when this community gives, lives change." Maya looked out at the room. Her photo stood on the display behind her, smiling bigger than she felt. The guests watched with soft faces, the way people watch a story that asks nothing from them except applause. Victor turned toward her. "Maya, tell everyone what this opportunity means to you." He lowered the microphone. Maya looked at it, then at the room, then toward the service corridor. Annie was not visible, but Maya knew she was down there, standing, cooking, being told not to speak. "It means a lot," Maya said. Victor nodded encouragingly. "And you're excited to begin classes?" "Yes, sir. With the support provided by this foundation." Maya's fingers tightened against the side of her dress. Claire's face changed. She saw it before Victor did. Maya leaned toward the microphone. "I'm excited to begin classes. I'm still waiting on the equipment voucher." The room shifted. Victor's hand tightened on her shoulder. "As I said earlier, administrative processing takes time." Maya looked at him. She was frightened. Annie would have seen that at once. But fear did not always mean retreat. Sometimes it meant a person had found the edge of what she could no longer swallow. "Yes, sir," Maya said. "But some of us have been waiting since March." The microphone caught it. At table 3, Harold stopped writing. Victor laughed lightly, trying to turn the moment. Young people are always eager, aren't they? Maya did not laugh. Senator Reeves leaned forward. A man near table 6 whispered, "Since March?" Victor took the microphone back. "Thank you, Maya. We're all very proud of you." Maya stepped back, but before she could leave the stage, Harold stood. "Mr. Langford," he said. Victor's smile held. "Yes, Harold. How many students have received full support from the fund this year?" The room went quiet in the manner of wealthy rooms, not silence exactly, but attention pretending it was still polite. Victor's eyes flicked to Claire. Claire did not answer for him. "That information is in our annual materials," Victor said. "I'm sure it is," Harold said. "I asked how many." In the kitchen, Annie stood motionless beneath the speaker. Marjorie whispered, "Oh Lord." Sam said, "No, let it come." Victor's voice sharpened by 1 degree. "This is hardly the time for administrative details." Harold glanced at Maya. "It seems to be exactly the time." Maya's eyes filled, but she kept her chin up. Victor stepped away from the microphone slightly, but not far enough. His next words still carried. "Get her off the stage," he said to Claire. A murmur moved through the room. Claire did not move. Victor realized the microphone had caught him. For the first time that evening, the public face slipped. Harold looked toward the service corridor. "And perhaps while we are discussing young people and opportunity, we should also thank the young woman who actually cooked tonight's meal." Victor turned cold. "Chef Valmont prepared the menu." "Prepared the menu, perhaps," Harold said, "but he did not cook what I ate." Several guests looked down at their dessert plates. "The hand pie," Harold said, lifting his voice just enough, "was not a luxury pretending to be humble. It was memory handled with discipline. The sea bass had the same hand, so did the broth. So did the grouper. I know this because I have spent 2 years looking for that hand." Victor's jaw tightened. "Harold, don't do this." Harold looked at him. "Don't do what? Tell the truth before you can purchase it?" That sentence ended the last of the polite noise. Below deck, Annie's breath caught. Sam looked at her. "Child, I can't go up there." No one said you had to, but they both knew the room had already started moving toward her. Harold continued. 2 years ago, an anonymous young chef entered the International Young Chef's crown under the initials AC. The winner disappeared before the press could put a face on the food. I believe that chef is on this yacht tonight. Victor forced a laugh. "This is absurd." "Maybe," Harold said. "Then let the cook speak for herself." All eyes turned toward the service corridor. Maya stepped off the stage, not toward her seat, but toward the corridor. Claire reached as if to stop her, then let her pass. Denise appeared in the kitchen doorway seconds later, her face pale. "Annie," she said. Annie already knew. Marjorie turned to her. "You don't have to." Victor's voice came through the dining room. Lower now, but still audible. "She is not coming out." Harold answered. "Then I'll come in." Annie touched the handkerchief in her pocket. The old cloth was warm from her body. A. C. in blue thread. Grace's hands. Grace's voice. "Cook for love, child, not for cameras." Annie had spent 2 years thinking that meant hiding from every camera. But upstairs, a girl had been used as a prop. A room had been fed by hands Victor wanted erased. A foundation had been praised by people who did not know whether its promises had reached anyone at all. Maybe love was not always quiet. Maybe sometimes love had to walk into the room. Annie untied her apron, then stopped. No, the apron belonged to the work. She tied it tighter instead. Sam smiled sadly. "There she is." Marjorie nodded toward the door. "Go before I change my mind and lock you in the pantry." Annie almost laughed. It came out as a breath. She walked through the service corridor with Denise beside her. The yacht seemed longer than it had all night. At the entrance to the dining room, Maya waited. Eyes wet, but steady. "I'm sorry," Maya whispered. Annie shook her head. "Don't be." Then Annie stepped into the room. Conversation died from the edges inward. Forks paused. Glasses lowered. People looked first at her apron, then at her face, then at the name tag that read Annie. Victor stood near the stage, furious enough to tremble and disciplined enough not to show all of it. Harold Bennett looked at her as though he had finally reached the end of a long road. "Miss Carter," he said, "would you mind telling us who cooked tonight's dinner?" Annie felt the room waiting for a performance. She gave them the truth instead. I did, she said, but I didn't cook it alone. The kitchen did. Victor's face changed before anyone else's did. Not fully. Men like him learned early how to keep their anger dressed for dinner. But Annie saw it in the tightness around his mouth, in the way his fingers closed around the microphone, in the small step he took as if he could physically stand between her and the truth. You? He said with a light laugh meant for the room. Miss Carter, I think you're confused. You assisted in the kitchen during an emergency. That's very different from cooking tonight's dinner. Annie kept her hands folded in front of her apron. No, sir, I'm not confused. A murmur moved through the tables. Harold Bennett did not sit down. Which courses did you finish? Annie looked at him, then at the room. She did not want the room. She had never wanted rooms like this. The chandelier light, the white tablecloths, the faces turned toward her as if she had become part of the evening's entertainment. But Maya stood near the stage with both hands locked together, and behind Annie, at the edge of the service corridor, Denise waited with her chin lifted. Somewhere below, Sam and Marjorie were probably listening through the kitchen speaker. Annie drew a breath. The sea bass, the shrimp broth, the grouper, the short rib, the dessert. A man at table 6 set his fork down. All of it? The kitchen helped with all of it, Annie said. No one cooks alone in a room like that. Harold's expression softened. That was a generous answer. It's a true one. Victor stepped in quickly. And we appreciate that spirit. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're seeing tonight is exactly why the Langford Foundation matters. Young workers gaining experience, being supported, learning under professionals. No, Annie said. The word was not loud, but it reached every table. Victor turned slowly. Excuse me? Annie felt her heartbeat rise, but she did not take the word back. Your foundation didn't support me. I work in your kitchen. I scrub pans, wash herbs, carry crates, and clean drains. Until tonight, I don't think you knew my name. Several guests looked toward Victor. He smiled with his teeth. Miss Carter, this is neither the time nor the place. That's what people always say when the time and place finally belong to someone else, Harold said. Victor's eyes flashed toward him. Harold, I have respected your career for years. Do not mistake that respect for permission to disrupt my event. Harold looked around the room. The food already disrupted it. Annie heard a few quiet breaths, the kind people take when someone says aloud what they had only begun to feel. Victor lowered the microphone slightly. Annie, return to the kitchen. It was not a request. For a moment, the old habit rose in her. Step back. Apologize. Keep the job. Leave through the crew, exit. Let them call the food Valmont's. Let them print whatever they wanted. Let AC disappear again. Then Maya spoke. She shouldn't have to leave. The room turned toward her. Maya looked frightened by her own voice, but she continued. She cooked the food, Mr. Bennett asked. She answered. Victor's smile vanished. Maya, the warning in her name was clear. Maya's eyes filled, but she did not step back. You told them I was proof your foundation changes lives. But I'm still waiting for the knife kit. So are 3 girls in my class. We keep getting emails, saying the money is processing. Claire stood beside the stage, pale and silent. Victor lifted the microphone again. Maya is understandably nervous. These programs involve paperwork. Since March? Senator Reeves asked. Victor turned toward her. Senator, I assure you, I asked a simple question. She said, has this young woman received the support your brochure says she received? The brochure sat on every table, thick paper, glossy photographs. Maya's face printed under the words, opportunity begins here. Victor glanced at Claire. Claire looked down. The pause told the room more than an answer would have. Harold closed his notebook. Miss Carter, did you know Maya before tonight? No, sir. Did the Langford Foundation train you? No, sir. Did Mr. Langford give you the opportunity to cook tonight? Annie looked at Victor. She thought of his first words in the kitchen. Your food disgusts me. She thought of him telling her people in her position, we're not here to think. She thought of him ordering staff to say Valmont had prepared the meal. No, she said. An emergency happened. No one wanted the responsibility. I stepped in because the food was dying. A quiet sound moved through the room. Not outrage yet. Recognition. Victor laughed again, but this time it came out thin. The food was dying. That's quite dramatic. Annie turned to him. So was the truth. The sentence landed harder than she expected. A few people looked away first, then looked back. as if ashamed of having looked away at all. Victor stepped closer to her, keeping his voice low enough that the microphone would not catch every word. "You are making a mistake you're too young to understand," Annie answered just as quietly. "I understood when you told the server to say Chef Valmont made the food." Victor's eyes sharpened. Harold heard enough. "Is that true?" Denise stood at the dining room entrance. For 1 second, Annie saw the woman weigh her job against her conscience. Then Denise said, "Yes, sir. Mr. Langford told me to say Chef Valmont prepared it." Victor spun toward her. "Denise." She lifted her chin. "You did." The room changed again. A man near the back took out his phone. Claire saw it and moved toward him, then stopped because 3 more phones were already up. Victor pointed at the staff. "No recordings." Senator Reeves said, "Victor, I would advise you to lower your hand." He lowered it. Harold looked at Annie. "There's another matter. 2 years ago, I tasted food with the same hand, the same restraint, the same use of pepper vinegar. The dish was signed AC." Annie's throat tightened. Victor seized on her silence. "This is absurd. Now we're building legends from sauce?" Harold ignored him. "Miss Carter, I won't force you, but if you are AC, you should know this room is not entitled to your story. No one is. Still, there is a difference between privacy and erasure." Annie looked down at her apron. Her hands had begun to shake. Not enough for the room to see, but enough for her to feel. In her pocket, the old handkerchief waited. AC. In blue thread. Annie Carter. Grace had sewn those letters when Annie was 9. Before contests, before loss. Before people wanted to package pain and call it inspiration. "Cook for love, child. Not for cameras." Annie took the handkerchief from her pocket. It was small, worn at the corners, soft from years of washing. She unfolded it once. The blue letters showed under the light. "Ah, che." Harold's eyes closed for a moment. Maya covered her mouth. Victor stared at the cloth as though it had betrayed him. "My grandmother made this," Annie said. "Her name was Grace Carter. I used those initials in the competition because I didn't want my face to matter more than the food. She taught me to cook for people, not for attention." Harold's voice was quiet. "You were 17. Yes, sir. You won the International Young Chef's crown." Annie nodded. The room broke into a dozen whispers at once. A woman at table 4 said, "That was her?" A man near the window searched on his phone. "AC chef competition. Here it is." Another guest said, "They looked for that person for years." 2, Harold corrected without turning. 2 years. Victor recovered enough to speak. "Well, this is certainly a surprise." He reached for a smile and found a poor version of it. "Annie, had you told us, we could have celebrated you properly." Annie looked at him. "You didn't need to know I won something to treat me with respect." No one moved. She did not mean to say more, but the words had opened a door. "You didn't need to know I was AC, to believe my hands were clean. You didn't need to know I had cooked before to listen when I said the food needed 2 minutes. You didn't need to know anything about me to not call me disgusting." Victor's face flushed. Harold's voice came low and firm. "That is the point, Victor." Victor turned to the room, trying one last time to regain the shape of host and benefactor. "Ladies and gentlemen, emotions are running high because of a kitchen emergency. Let's not lose sight of why we're here tonight. The Langford Foundation exists to help young people like Annie and Maya." "No," Maya said again. This time, her voice did not tremble. Victor stopped. Maya stepped closer to Annie, not onto the stage, just beside her. "You keep saying people like us. But you don't know people like us. You use our pictures. You put us in brochures. You ask us to smile next to words like hope and future. But when we ask about the money, someone tells us to wait." A woman in the front row lowered her program. Maya continued. "Tonight I watched you yell at her in the kitchen. Then I watched everyone eat what she made. And now you want to act like you gave her a chance." Victor's lips parted, but nothing came out fast enough. From the corridor, Sam's voice carried. "She gave herself the chance because nobody else had the spine." People turned. Sam stood at the entrance in his prep apron, one hand still wrapped in a towel. Marjorie stood behind him, not stopping him. Victor pointed toward the kitchen. "This is my event." Sam nodded. "Yes, sir, and that's the shame of it." The room held still. Harold Bennett turned to the guests. I have reviewed restaurants for 50 years. I have seen talent ignored, stolen, renamed, and sold back to the people it came from. Tonight, the best meal on this yacht was made by a young woman its owner tried to hide. Victor said, "Careful, Harold." "No," Harold said. "You be careful. You are standing in a room full of people who just learned your charity may not feed the people printed in its own brochure." Senator Reeves stood. "Mr. Langford, my office will be requesting documentation on the scholarship disbursements." Claire closed her eyes. A donor from Palm Beach pushed his chair back slightly. "I'd like to see those numbers too." Another guest murmured, "So would I." Victor looked around, realizing the room had shifted without asking his permission. Annie did not feel victorious. She felt exposed, tired, and strangely light, as if the truth had cost her something heavy. Harold stepped toward her. "Miss Carter, thank you for the meal." Annie folded the handkerchief. "Thank the kitchen." "I will," he said. "But I am thanking you first." For the first time that night, Annie accepted praise without shrinking from it. "Thank you, sir," she said. Victor stood near the microphone, surrounded by the people he had invited to admire him, and watched them look past him toward the young woman in the kitchen apron. That was when the first person began to clap. It was not loud. It was a single, measured sound from Harold Bennett's hands. Then Senator Reeves joined. Then Maya. Then Denise at the doorway. Then Sam. Slow and rough-palmed. Soon the room followed, not all at once, not perfectly, but enough. Annie stood very still, holding her grandmother's handkerchief in one hand. She had spent 2 years hiding from applause. This time, she understood it was not calling her away from Grace's promise. It was calling her back to it. The applause did not rise like celebration at first. It came slowly, almost cautiously, as if the room had to learn what it was allowed to honor. Harold Bennett kept clapping with his eyes on Annie. Senator Reeves stood beside her chair. Maya wiped her face with the heel of her hand and clapped as though she were trying to keep herself from shaking. Denise clapped from the doorway. Sam's hands came together once, twice, steady as a hammer finding a nail. Then more people stood, not all of them. Some guests stayed seated, embarrassed by the speed at which the evening had turned. A few looked toward Victor before deciding what to do, and that hesitation told its own story. But the applause grew anyway, spreading table by table, passing over white linen and half-finished desserts, around wine glasses and folded programs bearing Victor Langford's name. Annie did not know where to put her hands. She held the small handkerchief so tightly the worn blue letters nearly disappeared inside her fist. Victor stood near the microphone, still enough to seem calm from a distance. Up close, the calm was cracking. His jaw worked. His eyes moved from Harold to Senator Reeves to the phones rising quietly above the tables. He was counting damage now. Annie could see that. Not harm done to her. Not harm done to Maya. Not lies exposed. Damage. That was the language men like him used when truth became expensive. Claire moved to his side, speaking low. "Victor, we need to end the program." He did not look at her. "No. People are recording. I can see that." "Then stop giving them more." Victor took the microphone again. The applause faded, not because people wanted him to speak, but because power still had reflexes in the room. Annie felt the shift and understood how deep his control ran. Even after everything, the microphone in his hand made people quiet. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor said, his voice smooth enough to frighten anyone who had heard him in the kitchen, "tonight has taken an unexpected turn. I want to be clear. Miss Carter's contribution to this evening's meal is appreciated, deeply appreciated." Harold's face did not move. Victor turned slightly toward Annie. "Annie, it seems there has been a misunderstanding. Had we known about your background, had you shared your accomplishments with us, this could have been handled differently." Annie felt the old trap open in front of her. A misunderstanding. That word could wash blood off clean floors if people let it. Harold said, "That is not an apology." Victor's eyes flashed, but he kept smiling. "I was getting there." "No," Senator Reeves said. "You were getting around it." A few guests murmured. Victor inhaled through his nose. "Fine. Annie, I apologize if anything I said made you feel disrespected." Maya whispered, "If?" Denise heard her and nodded. Annie looked at Victor. He was waiting for her to rescue him. That was what the apology was for. Not remorse. Not repair. He needed her to nod. to say it was all right, to give the room permission to return to dessert and donation cards. She thought of Grace. Don't make a hungry person bow twice. But Victor was not hungry. He was full of himself and still asking her to serve him mercy on a plate. You didn't make me feel disrespected, Annie said. You disrespected me. The room went quiet again. Victor's smile thinned. Annie kept her voice low because she did not trust a louder one not to break. You said you couldn't swallow anything I cooked. You questioned whether my hands were clean. You told people to give another chef credit for my work, and when you found out I had won something, you acted like that changed what I deserved. She looked down at the handkerchief, then back at him. It didn't. Victor's grip tightened on the microphone. I deserved respect before you knew anything about me. Harold lowered his head slightly, not in sadness this time, but in agreement. Victor tried to recover. And I have acknowledged your talent. That is not the same thing, Annie said. Maya moved closer to her, and Annie felt the girl's presence without turning. For most of her life, Annie had stood alone in rooms that wanted her useful and quiet. Now a 17-year-old girl in a borrowed dress was standing close enough to say, without words, not this time. Senator Reeves looked at Victor. Mr. Langford, I would still like an answer regarding the scholarship funds. Victor's voice hardened. Senator, I would be happy to have my office provide documentation after the event. Good, she said. Please include disbursement records, administrative expenses, vendor contracts, and any transfers to related entities. Claire closed her folder slowly. A man from Table 6, the donor from Palm Beach, stood halfway. Related entities? The senator did not look away from Victor. A standard question when foundation money appears slow to reach its stated recipients. Victor laughed once. Appears? Based on what? A nervous teenager and a kitchen assistant? Annie felt Maya stiffen. Sam's voice came from the doorway. Careful how you talk about children when you're asking rich folks to donate in their name. Victor turned toward him. You are still here? Yes, sir, Sam said. Seems I keep ending up where the work is. A few people near the back let out a nervous laugh. Victor did not. Marjorie stepped beside Sam, her white coat still marked with sauce near one cuff. If you want facts, Mr. Langford, you might start with payroll. Claire's head turned quickly. Marjorie ignored her. Staff on this yacht worked 3 charity events last quarter. Overtime was promised. Half of it was reclassified. Victor's face went flat. This is not the forum. That's what you said about the scholarships. Harold said. Denise raised her hand slightly from the doorway, as if she were in church asking permission to testify. My son's picture was in last year's brochure. He never received his placement stipend. More murmurs. Victor pointed at her. Denise, think carefully. I have, she said. For a year. The room turned toward her. She swallowed, but went on. They took pictures of him in a chef coat 2 sizes too big. Said he was the future of hospitality. He dropped the program 6 weeks later, because we couldn't afford transportation after the stipend didn't come. Maya looked at Denise with a grief that was not surprise. It was recognition. Claire whispered, Victor, stop threatening staff in front of guests. I am not threatening anyone. You just did. The microphone was still near his hand. Not close enough to catch everything, but close enough that the first few tables heard. And what the first tables heard, the room carried. Harold looked at Annie. Miss Carter, did you know any of this before tonight? No, sir. Only pieces. Maya told me about the equipment voucher. Denise told me just now. And yet you spoke. Annie glanced at Maya. Some things get heavier if nobody speaks. Senator Reeves said, that is well put. Victor's patience broke through the polish. This is ridiculous. I invited all of you here to support opportunity, and now I'm being tried on my own yacht because a kitchen girl made a good dessert. Harold's eyes sharpened. No, Victor. You are being judged because you showed us how you treat people when you think they cannot help or hurt you. The sentence pulled the room into stillness. Annie remembered the first thing Harold had said to her with real kindness. Privacy and erasure. She had thought hiding kept Grace safe from the world's appetite. But maybe erasure did not protect love. Maybe it only made it easier for people like Victor to decide whose hands counted. A younger man near the bar lifted his phone. Senator, are you saying there may be an investigation? Senator Reeves did not answer him directly. She looked at Victor. I am saying my office will request records. What happens next? Depends on what those records show. The Palm Beach donor pushed his chair back fully now. Until those records are clear, I'm pausing my commitment. Another investor at the same table nodded. Same here. Victor turned to them. Let's not overreact to a theatrical moment. The donor looked at Annie, then at Maya, then at Denise. I don't think they're the ones performing. Claire put a hand to her forehead. For the first time that night, Victor seemed to understand that the room was no longer waiting for him to lead it. It was watching him shrink. Annie did not enjoy it. That surprised her. She had thought humiliation might taste like justice when served back to the person who had fed it to her. It did not. It tasted bitter, necessary, maybe, but bitter. She folded the handkerchief and placed it back in her pocket. Harold saw the movement. What will you do now? Annie looked toward the service corridor. Finish cleaning the kitchen. A quiet ripple moved through the guests. Victor almost laughed again. That's your answer? Yes, sir, Annie said. People cooked down there. People cleaned while everyone up here ate. The work doesn't vanish because the room started clapping. Sam smiled from the doorway, and for once he did not hide it. Maya said, Can I help? Annie turned to her. You're a guest. Maya looked at Victor's display board with her own face on it. I don't feel like one. Denise stepped in. Baby, stay out of dish pit in that dress. Trust me. A few people laughed. Real laughter this time. The kind that loosened the room without erasing what had happened. Harold walked closer to Annie. Before you go, may I say something? Annie nodded. He faced the room. I have eaten in famous restaurants where nothing on the plate remembered a single human being. Tonight, an 18-year-old woman in a service apron fed this room with more honesty than many chefs twice her age and 10 times her fame. Her name is Annie Carter. Some of you may know her soon as AC, but I hope you remember that you ate her food before you knew what those initials meant. He turned back to her. Thank you, Chef Carter. Annie's eyes burned. No one had ever called her that in front of a room like this. Not as a joke, not as charity, not as a story, as fact. She did not trust herself with many words. Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Victor lowered the microphone. He had lost the room, but not his anger. Annie could feel it as she turned away. He would not forgive this. Men like Victor mistook public embarrassment for injury, and they always looked for someone to bill. But as Annie walked back toward the service corridor, Maya fell into step beside her. And Denise followed with 2 empty dessert plates, and Sam waited at the doorway like an old guard who had decided the gate belonged to better people now. Behind them, guests began talking again, not about the weather, not about markets, not about wine. They were asking about vouchers, payroll, records, the chef named AC, and the girl whose picture smiled from a brochure while her knife kit never came. In the kitchen, Marjorie had already started breaking down the line. She looked at Annie and said, You know this means trouble. Annie tied her apron tighter. I know. You still want to clean? Annie picked up a stack of pans. Yes, chef. Marjorie's mouth twitched. Don't get cute. Sam laughed once. For the first time all night, Annie let herself smile. Not much, just enough to feel it. Then she turned toward the sink, carrying the weight of applause, anger, truth, and Grace's handkerchief in her pocket, and began washing what was left. The dish pit had a way of telling the truth after a party. Upstairs, people could soften their voices and call the evening complicated. They could say misunderstanding, surprise, unfortunate optics, administrative delay. Down in the kitchen, there were no words pretty enough to change what remained. Stacks of plates with peach filling stuck to the edges. Silverware clouded with cream, wine glasses marked by lipstick, sheet pans blackened at the corners, towels heavy with water and sauce. Every grand evening ended in somebody else's hands. Annie stood at the sink with sleeves pushed to her elbows, washing pans in water hot enough to redden her wrists. The applause still rang somewhere behind her ears. But it felt distant now, like music from another boat. The work in front of her was simple. Scrub, rinse, stack, start again. Maya stood nearby despite Denise's warning, holding a towel and drying small bowls with the awkward care of someone who had never worked a professional dish line but wanted to be useful. You don't have to do that, Annie said. I know. You'll ruin your dress. Maya looked down at the borrowed blue fabric. A drop of water had already darkened the front. It wasn't really mine anyway. Annie understood that more than Maya knew. Still, Maya dried another bowl. When Mr. Langford put his hand on my shoulder up there, I wanted to disappear. Annie kept scrubbing. I saw. He said I was the future. He didn't ask me one thing about my life. That's how people turn you into a symbol, Annie said. They remove the parts that might talk back. Maya looked at her. Is that why you hid? The pan in Annie's hands went still. Sam, who had been stacking sheet trays on the rack, glanced over but said nothing. Marjorie was at the prep table checking inventory, pretending not to listen in the way good adults sometimes did when young people needed room to speak. Annie rinsed the pan slowly. Part of it. What was the other part? My grandmother asked me not to let people sell my gift back to me. Maya frowned. What does that mean? Annie set the pan on the rack. It means some people don't just want what you can do. They want the story around it. They want your pain with nice lighting. They want your grandmother's kitchen, your neighborhood, your struggle, your tears. Then they package it, price it, and tell you to be grateful. Maya was quiet for a moment. That sounds like the scholarship video. Annie looked at her. Maya swallowed. They filmed us in the school kitchen last year. They told us to smile and hold knives like we were already chefs. I didn't even own one. They had to lend me the knife for the picture. Denise came through the swinging door carrying a bus tub of dessert plates. That brochure's been on every table tonight. Maya nodded. They asked me to say the foundation changed my life. Did it? Sam asked. Maya's mouth moved, then closed. It made me think my life might change. That's not the same. Denise set the tub down harder than she meant to. No, baby, it is not. Marjorie finally looked up. How many students are in your group? 24, maybe 26. Some stopped coming to meetings. Why? Transportation, uniforms, knife kits. One boy had to choose between paying for the ServSafe exam and helping his mom with rent. Sam wiped his hands on a towel. And the foundation promised to cover those? Maya nodded. That's what they said at orientation. Denise leaned against the counter. My son was in last year's program. Same promises. Same waiting. Annie turned off the faucet. For a few seconds, the only sound was the hum of refrigeration and muffled conversation from upstairs. The gala had not ended yet. People were still on board, still asking questions, still pretending to finish coffee while waiting to see what shape the scandal would take. Marjorie set down her clipboard. Denise, do you have anything in writing? Emails, texts, brochure proofs they sent us when they asked for permission to use his photo. Maya? I have emails too. My school director has more. Sam looked toward the corridor. Victor won't let this sit. No, Marjorie said. He'll bury it before sunrise if he can. Annie dried her hands. Then don't let him. Everyone looked at her. She felt the weight of their attention and almost stepped back from it. Then she thought of Victor saying, people like you. She thought of Grace saying, don't make a hungry person bow twice. She thought of Maya holding a borrowed knife for a photograph that raised money she never received. What do we do? Maya asked. Annie shook her head. I don't know. Harold Bennett's voice came from the doorway. Start by not being alone. He stood just outside the kitchen, his jacket folded over one arm, his leather notebook in the other hand. Behind him, Senator Reeves waited with Claire at a cautious distance. Claire looked like she had aged 5 years in 1 hour. Marjorie straightened. Mr. Bennett, we're breaking down service. I can see that, Harold said. I won't keep you long. Victor's voice cut in from the corridor before anyone answered. Yes, you will. He appeared behind the senator, no longer wearing the full public smile. He still looked composed, but the shine had worn off him. Without the stage, without the microphone, without guests arranged around him, he seemed less like a host and more like a man guarding a locked drawer. This is a staff area, Victor said. The event is upstairs. Senator Reeves looked at him. And several members of your staff are here. They are employees. They are witnesses. The word hung in the kitchen. Victor's eyes narrowed. Witnesses to what exactly? Harold opened his notebook. That is what we are trying to determine. No, Victor said. You are trying to turn a service issue into a public spectacle. Denise stepped forward. My son losing his stipend wasn't a service issue. Victor did not look at her. Denise, I would advise you to remember your employment agreement. Sam laughed once, without humor. There it is. Victor turned. What? The quiet threat. Took you longer than I expected. Claire said softly. Victor, don't. He ignored her. Mr. Whitaker, you are free to leave this vessel tonight, and not return. Sam nodded. I figured. Annie stepped between them before Sam could say more. Please stop threatening people. Victor looked down at her. You have caused enough damage. No, Annie said. I cooked dinner. Harold's mouth shifted, almost a smile. Victor pointed toward the dining room. Those people came here to support my foundation. Maya's voice came from behind Annie. Then why didn't the support reach us? Victor finally looked at her. His expression softened by force, not kindness. Maya, you're young. You don't understand how nonprofit funding works. Senator Reeves said, "Explain it." Victor blinked. "Pardon? You said she doesn't understand. Explain it to me. In plain terms. Why were equipment vouchers delayed for months while her image was used at tonight's fundraising gala?" Claire looked at the floor. Victor said, "Administrative expenses must be addressed before disbursement. What percentage of donations went to direct student support this year? That information is handled by our finance office. Then call them. Senator, it is nearly midnight. Then email them." Victor's face tightened. "This is inappropriate. So is fundraising on children who can't afford knife kits," Sam said. Marjorie looked at Claire. "You knew?" Claire's answer came too slowly. "I knew there were delays," she said. Maya whispered, "Delays?" Claire closed her eyes briefly. "I didn't know how bad." Denise shook her head. "People always know enough to keep cashing the check." Claire flinched because it was fair. Harold turned to Annie. "Miss Carter, I can publish what happened in the dining room, but the financial part needs records. Names, dates, promises made and missed." Annie looked at Maya. "Can your classmates send what they have?" Maya nodded. "Yes. Some are scared, but yes." Denise said, "I have my son's emails." Marjorie said, "Payroll records may be harder, but staff have check stubs." Victor laughed under his breath. "This is absurd. You are gathering a mob in my galley." "No," Senator Reeves said. "They are gathering documentation." He looked at her, and for the first time, there was open anger. "You would take the word of kitchen staff over mine?" The senator's face went cold. "I would take records over anyone's." Annie saw Claire look at Victor then. Not as an employee waiting for orders, but as someone who had just realized the man she protected might drag her under with him. Victor seemed to see it too. "Claire," he said. "We are leaving." She did not move. His voice lowered. "Now." Claire removed her headset and placed it on the stainless steel counter. "I'll stay and make sure no one tampers with staff statements." Victor stared at her. The kitchen went still. It was not as dramatic as applause. No one cheered. But Annie felt the shift. One more person had stepped out from behind Victor's shadow. He looked around the room, calculating again. Harold, Senator Reeves, Claire, staff, phones, upstairs, Maya, Annie. "This will ruin people," he said. Harold answered, "Truth usually ruins the arrangement, not the people." Victor's eyes landed on Annie. "You have no idea what you've started." Annie thought about that. Maybe he was right. She had started with sauce in 2 minutes. Now there were scholarships, payroll, witnesses, records, and a 70-year-old critic holding a notebook like a match. "No," she said, "but I know what you tried to stop." Victor did not answer. He turned and walked out, leaving behind the smell of cologne and anger. For several seconds, no one spoke. Then Maya let out a breath that sounded almost like a sob. Denise put an arm around her. "Easy, baby." Senator Reeves stepped closer to Marjorie. "I need names and contact information for anyone willing to speak. Voluntary. No pressure. I will not have staff coerced either way." Marjorie nodded. "I'll ask." Harold looked at Annie. "And you?" Annie touched the handkerchief in her pocket. "I'll give you what I know. But I won't let this become only about me." "It won't," Harold said. Sam picked up a wet pan and handed it to her. "Then we best finish these dishes before justice gets too full of itself." Annie took the pan. For the first time since Victor had shouted at her, the kitchen did not feel like a place waiting to punish someone. It felt like a room where people had started remembering they had names. By the time the last bus tub was emptied, the Aurelia had grown quiet in the way expensive places did after midnight, when the music stopped and only the workers remained to hear what the building, or the boat, really sounded like. Upstairs, guests were still leaving in small groups, some avoiding Victor, some speaking too closely with Senator Reeves, some asking Claire for cards she no longer seemed eager to hand out. Downstairs, the kitchen smelled of soap, butter, coffee glaze, peaches, and fatigue. Annie wiped the final counter with slow strokes. Her shoulders ached. Her feet hurt inside shoes that had never fit quite right. The handkerchief in her pocket felt heavier than cloth should have. Maya sat on an overturned crate near the dry storage shelves, her borrowed dress folded under her knees so it would not drag on the floor. Denise had given her an apron to cover the water spots. She looked younger now, away from the brochure lights. "Do you think he'll really get investigated?" Maya asked. Senator Reeves had left 20 minutes earlier with names, email addresses, and a promise that sounded careful but real. Harold had gone with her, his notebook full. Claire had stayed behind with Marjorie long enough to copy staff contacts and ask quiet questions about payroll codes. Sam closed a cabinet with his hip. Men like Langford don't fall because somebody tells one story. They fall when enough people stop pretending their own stories don't connect. Maya nodded, though Annie could tell she was still frightened. It was one thing to speak on a stage with anger in your throat. It was another to think about tomorrow, when anger had to become paperwork. Marjorie came out of the office holding a folder. Claire found the event staffing sheets. 3 charity galas, where overtime was marked as volunteer hours. Denise, drying a tray, gave a humorless laugh. Volunteer. That's a fancy word for stealing, when the person doing the work is poor. Marjorie did not argue. She also said the scholarship fund reports may show payments issued to a vendor connected to Langford Hospitality. Sam looked at her. May show? That's how people with lawyers say yes. Annie rinsed the rag and wrung it out. Will Claire talk? Marjorie leaned against the counter. I think she already knows silence won't save her. The service door opened before anyone could answer. Victor walked in alone. For once, no manager followed him. No PR director. No assistant with a tablet. His white jacket was gone. He wore only the dress shirt beneath, sleeves buttoned, collar still stiff. Without the jacket, he looked less ceremonial, more human, though not softer. Everyone stopped. Victor looked at the cleaned counters, the stacked pans, the staff gathered in a room that no longer bent toward him as quickly as it had before. Leave us, he said. No one moved. His eyes went to Marjorie. I said, leave us. Marjorie folded her arms. No. Victor stared at her. Sam stepped beside Annie without making a show of it. Denise moved closer to Maya. The gesture was small, but Victor saw it. A line had formed, not across the floor but in the air. Victor's mouth tightened. I need to speak with Annie. You can speak here, Annie said. He turned to her. His anger was still there, but now something else lived beside it. Fear, maybe. Or the insult of being unable to command privacy. This has gone far enough, he said. Annie said nothing. Victor lowered his voice. You had your moment. Bennett got his little revelation. The senator got her righteous questions. The staff got to feel brave. Now we all have to think about consequences. Sam muttered. Funny how consequences only matter after truth shows up. Victor ignored him. Annie, I can make this right for you. Maya looked up sharply. Annie held the wet rag in both hands. For me? Yes, you're talented. Clearly. I can arrange training, a position, media guidance. We can introduce you properly. A.C. discovered aboard the Aurelia during the Langford Gala. That story has value. Harold's words from earlier returned to her. Privacy and erasure. Grace's words came after. Don't let them dress your gift up and sell it back to you. Annie looked at Victor. You want to sell the story. I want to control the damage. At least that's honest. He stepped closer. You don't understand how quickly public attention turns ugly. Today they clap. Tomorrow they ask why you hid. Then they dig. Family, school, jobs. Every mistake you ever made. Every bill. Every photograph. You think Harold Bennett can protect you from that? Annie felt the old fear stir. He knew exactly where to press. Fame had always seemed less like a door to her, and more like a window people could look through without knocking. Victor saw the hesitation and softened his voice. Let me handle it. We announced that you were part of an internal mentorship program. We correct the scholarship delays quietly. Staff get paid. Maya gets her equipment. You get credit. Carefully. Everyone wins. Denise said. Everyone keeps quiet, you mean? Victor's eyes cut to her. Everyone avoids a circus. Marjorie opened the folder. And the reclassified overtime? Handled internally. The vendor payments? Reviewed. Maya stood. And the students who already dropped out? Victor looked at her, impatient. We can't rewrite every inconvenience. The word inconvenience did what all his smoother words had failed to hide. Maya's face changed. Denise put a hand on her shoulder. Annie placed the rag on the counter. My grandmother used to say you can tell what a person values by what they call small. Victor frowned. What? You called her missing knife kit paperwork. You called Denise's son dropping out an inconvenience. You called me a kitchen girl until Mr. Player. Bennett said my initials mattered. Annie's voice stayed low, but the kitchen had gone still enough to carry it. That's not damage control, Mr. Langford. That's who you are. His face hardened. Careful. No, she said. I've been careful all night. Sam's mouth twitched, but he kept quiet. Victor looked around the kitchen, then back at her. You are 18 years old. Do not confuse applause with power. I'm not. Good. Because power is what decides whether you work again. Marjorie stepped forward. Are you threatening her employment? I own this vessel, and I ran this kitchen tonight. You are suspended pending review. Marjorie nodded once, as if she had expected the blow and found it smaller than fear had promised. Put it in writing. Victor blinked. She went on. And include that I was suspended after providing information about payroll irregularities to a United States senator. Claire's voice came from the doorway. I would advise against that, Victor. Everyone turned. Claire stood with her handbag over one shoulder, and her headset still absent. She looked tired, but her voice was clear. Victor's eyes narrowed. You're still here? Yes, and I sent copies of the staffing sheets to my attorney. His expression went cold. You did what? Protected myself. Claire stepped into the kitchen. Something I should have done the first time I saw scholarship funds routed through consulting fees. Maya whispered, Consulting fees? Claire looked at her with real shame. I'm sorry. Maya did not forgive her. She did not have to. Victor pointed at Claire. You signed confidentiality agreements. Confidentiality does not cover fraud. The word struck the kitchen like a dropped pan. Victor's voice went very quiet. You had better be certain. I am certain enough not to leave the only copies with you. For the first time, Victor looked fully alone. He turned back to Annie, as if she were still the easier target. You think these people are your friends? They will use you too. Bennett will write his article. Reeves will make her statement. Claire will save herself. Marjorie will find another kitchen. And you will be left with attention you never wanted. Annie did not answer quickly because some of what he said might be true. Not about them, maybe, but about the world. People loved a story when it was fresh. They moved on when it required work. Then Maya spoke. I won't move on. Annie turned. Maya's hands were shaking, but she kept them at her sides. I'll send the emails. I'll ask the others. I don't care if I'm scared. Denise said, I'll call my son. Marjorie lifted the folder. I'll talk to payroll staff. Claire said, I'll give Reeves what I have. Sam looked at Victor. And I'm old. Folks underestimate how much trouble old men can make with free time. Annie almost laughed, but her eyes were burning. Victor looked from one face to another and understood, finally, that this was not a moment anymore. It was a chain. His voice came out flat. You will regret this. Annie met his eyes. Maybe. But not as much as I'd regret staying quiet. He held her gaze a second longer, then turned and left. No one moved until the door swung shut. Maya sat back down like her knees had stopped working. Denise wrapped both arms around her. Claire leaned against the wall and closed her eyes. Marjorie exhaled through her nose, then looked at Annie. You know he's not done. I know. Sam picked up the rag Annie had set down and tossed it into the laundry bin. Neither are we. Annie reached into her pocket and took out the handkerchief. She unfolded it on the clean counter. The blue letters looked faded under the kitchen lights, but they were still there. Che. For years, those letters had been a hiding place. Tonight, they had become something else. Not a brand. Not a costume. Not bait for cameras. A name tied to Grace, to Maya, to Denise's son, to Sam's rough hands and Marjorie's risk, to every person who had ever done the work while someone else took the bow. Annie touched the stitches. I don't want to be famous, she said. Sam stood beside her. Then don't be. Be useful. Be honest. Be hard to erase. Maya looked up. Can someone be all that at 18? Annie folded the handkerchief carefully. I guess we'll find out. Above them, footsteps crossed the deck as the last guests left the Aurelia. Somewhere outside, a tender boat engine started, carrying people back toward shore with questions in their pockets and peach still on their tongues. In the kitchen, Annie Carter picked up another pan, and this time, when she began to scrub, she did not feel invisible. Morning reached Miami before Annie did. She left the Aurelia through the crew exit a little after 4, when the sky was still dark and the marina lights made long yellow lines on the water. Sam walked beside her with his jacket over one shoulder. Maya had gone home with Denise, who refused to let the girl wait alone for a rideshare after everything that had happened. Marjorie stayed behind with Claire to copy the last staffing sheets and lock the kitchen office before Victor could send someone in to organize the files. Annie carried no trophy, no check, no contract. Just her work shoes in one hand, her grandmother's handkerchief in her pocket, and the smell of dish soap still caught in her sleeves. Sam stopped near the parking lot. "You got a ride? I'll call one. At this hour? I've done it before." That does not answer the question in a way I like. Annie was too tired to argue. "I'll wait by the security booth." Sam grunted. "I'll wait with you. You don't have to." "I know." They stood under a lamp while the marina slept around them. A gull cried somewhere in the dark. Across the water, the Aurelia looked peaceful again, as if nothing ugly had happened inside it. Annie stared at the yacht and wondered how many places learn to look beautiful by hiding the people who made them run. Sam handed her a paper cup of coffee from the cruise station. "Tastes like old tires, but it's warm." She took it. "Thank you." They drank in silence for a minute. Then Sam said, "You going to answer Harold Bennett when he calls?" Annie looked at the cup. "I don't know. He will call." "I know. You don't have to give him your whole life. That's what I'm afraid people will want." Sam nodded. "Some will. They'll want Grace, Charleston, the disappearing chef, the billionaire, the yacht. They'll want the whole pot and then complain there's too much salt." Annie almost smiled. Sam looked at her kindly. "But some folks may just want to know the truth." Annie touched the pocket where the handkerchief rested. "My grandmother told me not to cook for cameras." "Did you?" "No." "Then start there." Her rideshare arrived at 4:31. Sam checked the license plate, looked at the driver, then opened the back door for her with old-fashioned care that made Annie think of church parking lots and men who still removed their hats indoors. "Call someone when you get home," he said. "I will. Not I'll think about it." "Call someone." "I will, Mr. Sam." He nodded. "Good night, Chef." She paused halfway into the car. He did not smile when he said it. That made it harder to dismiss. "Good night," she said softly. The car pulled away. Annie watched Sam grow smaller in the rear window until the marina lights swallowed him. By 9 that morning, the first video was online. Not the whole thing, just 12 seconds. Victor Langford on stage, face tight, saying, "This is ridiculous. I invited all of you here to support opportunity. And now I'm being tried on my own yacht because a kitchen girl made a good dessert." By noon, another clip appeared. Annie standing in her apron saying, "I deserved respect before you knew anything about me." By evening, Harold Bennett published his column. The headline was simple. AC was in the kitchen. Annie read it sitting on the edge of her bed in the small room she rented from a retired school secretary in Little Haiti. She had slept only 3 hours. Her phone would not stop buzzing. Marjorie had texted twice. Maya had sent a string of messages from classmates offering screenshots. Denise sent a photo of her son's old brochure page with one sentence. "We're ready." Sam left a voicemail that said, "Don't read comments. I mean it." Annie read Harold's piece anyway. He did not tell her whole life. He did not mention Grace's deathbed except to say Annie cooked in honor of the woman who raised her. He did not call her a miracle. He did not make her pain sound pretty. He wrote about the food, the staff, the lie, the handkerchief, Maya's unpaid voucher, Denise's son, and Victor's attempt to erase a cook after using her work. The final line made Annie put the phone down. "We do not discover talent when the powerful finally notice it. We discover our own failure to look sooner." She sat very still. Her landlord, Mrs. Alvarez, knocked lightly on the open door. She was in her 70s, Cuban-American, with silver hair pinned at the back and the habit of calling every young person Mija whether they belonged to her or not. "You ate?" Mrs. Alvarez asked. Annie looked up. "Not yet." "That means no." She stepped in with a plate covered in foil. "Eggs, toast." Little plantains. I saw your face on my daughter's phone. You look tired in every video. Annie's throat tightened. I didn't mean for all this to happen. Mrs. Alvarez set the plate on the dresser. Most important things are not polite enough to ask permission. Annie laughed once, then wiped her eyes before the laugh could turn into something else. Mrs. Alvarez sat beside her with the care of someone lowering herself onto old knees. They saying good things? Some. And bad? I haven't looked. Good. Internet is a room with no windows. Don't live there. Annie smiled despite herself. Her phone rang. Harold Bennett. She stared at the name until Mrs. Alvarez glanced over. You going to answer? I'm scared. That does not mean no. Annie took the call. Miss Carter, Harold said. His voice sounded older over the phone, less like a man at a gala, and more like a grandfather calling after church. I hope I'm not disturbing you. No, sir. I wanted to warn you before the rest comes. Senator Reeves's office is requesting records. 2 donors have already paused commitments. A national paper called me this morning. I told them they could quote my column and leave you alone unless you agree. Thank you. You owe no one an interview. Annie looked at the plate Mrs. Alvarez had brought her. What if staying quiet lets him control the story again? Harold paused. That is the question, isn't it? I don't want fame. I believe you. I don't want my grandmother turned into a headline. Then set the terms. Speak only where the truth needs your voice. Refuse the rest. Annie breathed in slowly. Can people do that? Not perfectly, Harold said. But they can try. And you won't have to try alone. By the next day, the story had changed shape. It was no longer only about a young chef. Reporters found public filings for the Langford Foundation. Former staff began posting about unpaid hours. Students from Maya's program shared emails about delayed stipends and missing equipment. One local station interviewed Denise's son outside his apartment. He was 22, broad-shouldered, shy, still wearing the grocery store polo he had bought after leaving the culinary program. They used my picture, he said, looking away from the camera. But when I needed bus money to keep attending class, nobody returned my calls. That clip hurt Annie more than the ones of Victor insulting her. Marjorie called that evening. I've been suspended. Annie closed her eyes. I'm sorry. Don't be. They put it in writing, like I asked. My lawyer laughed for the first time all day. You have a lawyer? Claire found one willing to talk to several of us together. Annie sat up. Claire did? Guilt is a strong organizer. Despite everything, Annie laughed softly. Marjorie's voice changed. Listen. There's a community kitchen in Liberty City. They train young people for restaurant work. Real training, not brochure training. Their director called me asking about you. Me? She read Harold's column. She doesn't want a celebrity chef. She wants someone who can teach flavor and discipline without making students feel small. Annie did not answer. Marjorie continued. No pressure. Just thought you should know there are kitchens that don't belong to men like Victor. Annie looked at the handkerchief lying on her nightstand. I'd like to see it. Good. I'll set it up. That night, Annie finally listened to Sam's voicemail again. Don't read comments. I mean it. She did not read them. Instead, she unfolded Grace's handkerchief and placed it beside the plate Mrs. Alvarez had brought. Now empty except for crumbs and a little sugar from the plantains. Then she called Maya. The girl answered on the second ring. Chef Annie? Annie did not correct her. You okay? Annie asked. I don't know. My classmates are sending everything. Some are excited. Some are scared. One girl's mom said we shouldn't fight rich people. Annie understood that fear. It was older than both of them. She's not wrong to be scared, Annie said. But being scared doesn't mean you hand them the truth and let them bury it. Maya was quiet. Will you come with us if Senator Reeves asks to meet? Annie looked toward the dark window. Outside, cars moved along the street. Ordinary people going to late shifts, early shifts, second jobs, hospital rooms, diners, airport counters, lives that never made gala brochures but held the country together. Yes, Annie said. I'll come. After she hung up, she sat for a long time with the phone in her hand. The world had found AC. She could not change that now. But maybe the real question was never whether she would be seen. Maybe it was what she would let people see when they looked. Not a costume, not a miracle, not a poor girl rescued by a billionaire's stage. A cook, a granddaughter, a witness, and maybe, if she was brave enough, a door held open for someone behind her. The community kitchen sat between a laundromat and a small Baptist church in Liberty City, in a low beige building with faded blue trim, and a sign that read, Second Table Training Kitchen. It did not look like a place where national reporters would call. It looked like a place where people came because they needed a skill, a meal, or one person to tell them they were not too late. Annie stood outside with Marjorie on a bright Wednesday morning, 1 week after the gala. Heat rose from the sidewalk. Cars passed with windows down. Somewhere nearby, a man was selling mango slices from a cooler, calling out prices in a voice roughened by sun and years. Marjorie held a folder under one arm. "You nervous?" "Yes." "Good. Means you're awake." Annie looked at her. "That's your comfort?" "I'm a sous chef, not a greeting card." Annie smiled, then looked back at the door. Since Harold's column, her life had become a string of voices, asking for pieces of her. Morning shows, podcasts, food magazines, people who wanted her to cry on camera about Grace, people who wanted to know if she forgave Victor, people who wanted to offer her jobs before they knew how she liked to run a station. She had declined almost all of them. Harold had helped her say no without apologizing. Sam said no was a complete sentence, and then used 3 more sentences to make sure she understood it. But this place felt different. No cameras waited outside. No sponsor banner hung over the entrance. No one had asked her to bring the handkerchief. Inside, the kitchen was clean but worn. The stainless tables carried knife marks. The floor tiles had been scrubbed so many times the color had faded near the sinks. 6 young people stood around a prep table, wearing white coats that did not match. Some were too big. One had a missing button. Another had a name written inside the collar in black marker. Maya stood among them. When she saw Annie, she straightened. "You came. I said I would. I know. Maya glanced at the others. People say things. Annie understood. I came. The director of Second Table was a woman named Ruth Coleman, 61, with close-cropped gray hair and the calm eyes of someone who had broken up fights, stretched budgets, and taught knife skills in the same afternoon. She shook Annie's hand with both of hers. "Miss Carter," Ruth said. "Thank you for coming. Annie is fine. Then Ruth is fine too. And this is not an audition. I want you to know that before anyone touches an onion." Annie blinked. "An audition?" Ruth smiled. "Famous people make folks perform. We try not to do that here." Marjorie gave Annie a look that said, "See?" Ruth led them to the prep table. "Class. This is Annie Carter. Some of you know her from the news. Some of you know her because Maya has not stopped talking about peach hand pies." Maya looked down, embarrassed. "They were good. They were more than good," one boy said. He was tall and thin, with a scar through one eyebrow. My auntie watched the clip 4 times and said that Billionaire looked like somebody stole his chair. A laugh moved around the table. Annie felt her shoulders loosen. Ruth said, "Today is not about the yacht. It is about what happens when food has to carry truth without turning into a speech." "Annie, I thought maybe you could show them the pepper vinegar." Annie looked at the table. On it were collard stems, onions, vinegar, hot peppers, cornmeal, canned peaches, eggs, flour, and a few whole fish packed in ice. Not luxury, possibility. She washed her hands, tied on an apron Ruth handed her, and stepped to the head of the table. For a second, everyone watched too closely. She almost shrank from it. Then she remembered what Sam said. Be useful, be honest, be hard to erase. "My grandmother used pepper vinegar for balance," Annie began. "Not to make food hot. Heat is easy. Balance is harder." The students leaned in. She picked up a jar of vinegar and peppers. If a dish is too rich, acid can wake it up. If it is too sweet, bitterness can give it a backbone. If it is flat, salt might help. But salt is not magic. You have to ask what the food is missing before you start throwing things at it. The boy with the eyebrow scar raised a hand. "Like people?" Annie looked at him. He shrugged. "Folks always throwing advice before they know what's missing." Ruth smiled faintly. Annie nodded. "Yes. Like people. They cooked for 2 hours. Not fancy food. Fried fish with cornmeal crust. Greens cooked with smoked turkey. Peach hand pies made from dough that cracked if handled too much." Annie did not talk about awards. She talked about listening, about tasting with clean spoons. about not covering mistakes with more seasoning, about letting onions cook long enough to become honest. She corrected Maya's knife grip twice and praised her only when the cut deserved it. Maya accepted both with the seriousness of someone being treated like a student instead of a symbol. Marjorie worked beside Annie without taking over. Ruth watched from the doorway, arms folded, saying little. Halfway through, Sam arrived carrying a crate of lemons he claimed had fallen off the back of a discount. No one believed him. Denise came after him with her son, Marcus, the young man from the news clip. He stood at the doorway for a while before Ruth handed him an apron. "I'm not in the program anymore," Marcus said. Ruth pointed to the sink. "Then you can wash your hands without paperwork." He did. By noon, they pushed 2 tables together in the dining area and ate what they had made. No chandeliers, no printed menus, no investors, just paper napkins, sweet tea, hot fish, greens, hand pies, and people passing plates without being told where to sit. Maya took one bite of her hand pie and looked at Annie. "Mine isn't like yours." "It shouldn't be, but it's not as good." "Not yet." Maya nodded, not hurt. "Okay." Marcus ate quietly. After a while, he said, "If the stipends come through," Ruth said I could rejoin the class. Denise looked down at her plate. Annie asked, "Do you want to?" Marcus took his time. "I think so. I got embarrassed when I had to quit. Felt like I failed." Sam, seated across from him, wiped his mouth with a napkin. "Boy, being pushed out is not the same as walking away." Marcus looked at him. Sam went on. "Learn the difference early. Saves years." No one rushed to fill the silence. That was one thing Annie liked about the room. People here allowed truth to sit down before they tried to move it. After lunch, Ruth walked Annie outside. Marjorie stayed behind to discuss schedules. Maya and Marcus were helping wash dishes. Sam was telling 2 students a story that had already become longer than necessary. Ruth stood beside Annie under the strip of shade near the door. "I can offer part-time for now. Teaching assistant, kitchen, mentor, whatever title doesn't make you run." Annie laughed softly. "That obvious?" "Child, you look at opportunity like it might bite. Sometimes it does." "Yes," Ruth said. "But not every open door belongs to a trap." Across the street, 2 little boys chased each other around a parked car. The laundromat door opened, and a woman came out carrying folded sheets in a plastic basket. Annie said, "I'm afraid if I put my name on something, people will make it about me. They might try. I don't want that. Then build something that keeps pointing back to the work." Annie looked through the window. Maya was drying bowls. Marcus was laughing at something Sam said. Marjorie had a pen tucked behind one ear, already arguing with Ruth about freezer space. Ruth followed her gaze. "You won't save everyone. Let's get that out of the way." Annie turned to her. Ruth's voice stayed gentle. "You will disappoint people. You will be tired. Some students will quit. Some will lie. Some will break your heart because that is what young people do when the world has been rough with them. But some will learn. Some will feed their families. Some will stand straighter because you refuse to make them feel small." Annie felt Grace's handkerchief in her pocket and pressed her fingers against it. "What would the job be?" she asked. Ruth smiled. "Come twice a week. Teach flavor, timing, discipline. Help us build a real scholarship fund once Reeves shakes the money loose. No cameras unless the students vote on it. No poverty theater. No one's pain used as seasoning." Annie breathed out slowly. That was the first offer that sounded like Grace. Her phone buzzed. A message from Harold. "Senator Reeves just announced a formal inquiry. 3 donors are redirecting pledged funds into a temporary student relief account. Your name was mentioned only with consent. Call when ready." Annie showed the message to Ruth. Ruth read it, then handed back the phone. "Well?" Annie looked once more through the window. Maya saw her and lifted a wet hand in a small wave. Marcus held up a plate as if asking whether it was clean enough. Sam shook his head at both of them. Marjorie was still arguing, which meant she was probably happy. Annie smiled. "I can come Tuesdays and Thursdays," she said. Ruth nodded. "Good. We start with onions." "Why onions?" "Because everybody wants to rush them." Annie laughed then, real and quiet. That evening, after she got home, she unfolded Grace's handkerchief and placed it on the kitchen table. For the first time in 2 years, the letters A, C, did not feel like something she had to hide or defend. They felt like a beginning written by someone who had loved her before the world knew what to call her. Annie took out a notebook and wrote at the top of the first page, "Second table. Lesson 1. Balance." Then, beneath it, she wrote one more line, "Cook for love, not for cameras, but don't let love be erased." 6 months later, Annie Carter stood in the doorway of Second Table Training Kitchen and watched Maya Brooks burn the onions. Not ruin them, burn them just enough to learn. Maya stood over the pan with her shoulders tight, one hand gripping the wooden spoon as if the onions had insulted her personally. "They were fine 10 seconds ago. They were almost fine," Annie said. "That sounds like fine. That sounds like almost." Maya gave her a look. "You enjoy this?" "I enjoy watching people learn the difference." Around them, the Tuesday class moved with more confidence than it had in the beginning. Marcus cleaned fish near the sink, no longer apologizing every time his knife touched bone. A girl named Tasha rolled dough with her headphones around her neck, humming low. The boy with the eyebrow scar, whose name was Eli, tasted broth and said it needed acid before Annie could ask. Ruth Coleman sat at the office desk pretending to do paperwork while keeping one ear on the room. Sam came twice a week now, though no one had hired him. He called himself Quality Control and ate enough to make the title suspicious. Marjorie had become the kind of instructor students feared for 10 minutes and trusted for life. Second Table had changed too, not into something glossy. Annie would have hated that. The walls were still beige, the floor still faded near the sinks, but the broken oven had been replaced. The walk-in door sealed properly. There were new knife kits on a shelf with students' names written on tape. No cameras had filmed their arrival. Ruth had insisted on that. "Let children receive things without performing gratitude," she had said, and Annie had written it down. The money came after the inquiry began, not all at once. Money connected to powerful men rarely walked back politely. It had to be pulled, documented, argued over, and, in some cases, threatened loose. Senator Reeves's office released enough findings to make the story national for another week. Scholarship funds delayed, consulting fees routed through a Langford-linked company, staff overtime reclassified, student images used in fundraising materials that overstated support. Victor Langford denied wrongdoing until denial cost more than settlement. Then his attorneys announced corrections, reimbursements, and a renewed commitment to transparency, which made Sam laugh so hard he had to sit down. Victor stepped away from the foundation board in August. By September, donors had redirected the remaining funds into an independent student trust administered by people who had never owned a yacht. Denise's son, Marcus, returned to training. Maya received her knife kit, her uniform, and a transportation stipend. When the first check cleared, she cried in the bathroom for 7 minutes, and then came back out pretending allergies had attacked her. Annie did not become famous in the way people expected. She turned down the morning shows. She refused a docuseries. She gave one interview to Harold Bennett, in a quiet room at Second Table with Ruth beside her and Grace's handkerchief folded on the table between them. Harold asked about food first, not pain. That was why she answered. When he asked what AC meant now, Annie thought a long time before speaking. "It means I don't have to disappear to protect what I love," she said. "But I don't have to sell it either." The article ran with no dramatic photograph. Just Annie's hands guiding Maya's hand over an onion. Both of them laughing because Maya had sliced it too thick. Under the picture, the caption read, "Chef Annie Carter teaches balance at Second Table." Chef Annie Carter. The first time Annie saw it, she set the paper down and walked outside for air. Now, in the kitchen, Maya scraped the onions from the pan into a bowl and frowned. "Can we save them?" Annie tasted a small piece. "Some. Not all." Maya sighed. "That feels like a life lesson." "It's a kitchen. Most life lessons come with dishes." Sam, sitting near the prep table with a cup of coffee, lifted one finger, and burns. Marjorie called from the far station. "And people who don't listen the first time," Eli said. "That was directed at me." "It was directed at everyone," Marjorie said. The class laughed and kept working. At noon, they served lunch to the neighborhood. Stewed chicken, rice, greens, cornbread, roasted vegetables, peach hand pies, and a pot of pepper vinegar placed on every table. Some people paid, some did not. Ruth's rule was simple. No one left hungry. and no one was asked to explain why they could not pay. Annie moved between tables, correcting seasoning, greeting regulars, checking on students. She was near the serving counter when the front door opened and Harold Bennett walked in carrying a small paper bag. He wore a brown jacket and leaned on a cane now. The months had made him look thinner, but his eyes remained sharp. Sam saw him first. Critics here. Everybody hide the salt. Harold smiled. Too late. I brought my own. He held up the bag. Annie walked over. Mr. Bennett, Miss Carter, you know you don't have to keep saying miss. And you know you don't have to keep saying mister. Neither of them changed. He handed her the bag. Inside was a small framed clipping from the old Atlanta competition program. Annie had never seen it printed. AC. Winner. International Young Chef's Crown. No photograph, no biography. Only the initials she had hidden behind. I thought you should have it, Harold said. Not because you need proof, because records matter. Annie looked at the frame and felt the old ache rise, softer now. Thank you. Harold glanced around the dining room. Grace would have liked this. Annie's throat tightened. You didn't know her? No, he said. But I've eaten enough of what she taught you. She looked through the kitchen window. Maya was showing Marcus the onion trick again, this time with more patience than she had shown herself. Tasha was explaining dough to a new student. Marjorie was pretending not to be proud. Ruth was sitting with an elderly man who came every Tuesday and always asked for extra greens. Maybe that was how Grace remained, not as a story people consumed, but as a practice repeated in other hands. After lunch, Ruth gathered everyone near the back wall. A local carpenter had donated a wooden plaque. Simple and smooth. No gold lettering. No sponsor logos. Annie had resisted it for weeks, but Ruth said some things should be named where people could see them. The plaque read, Grace Carter Table. For every student who deserves to be fed, taught, and respected before the world knows their name. Maya stood beside Annie, wiping her hands on her apron. You okay? No. Good no or bad no? Big no. Maya nodded like that made sense. Ruth handed Annie a small screwdriver. You should tighten the last screw. Annie shook her head. I can't. Yes, you can, Sam said. Annie looked at him. He softened. Not because you're not scared. Because you're here. She took the screwdriver. Her hand trembled slightly as she turned the final screw into place. The plaque settled against the wall. Not grand. Not perfect, but firm. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Marcus said, Miss Grace got a table now. Annie laughed, and the laugh broke into tears before she could stop it. Maya hugged her first. Then Denise, who had come for lunch with Marcus and stayed. Then Ruth. Sam put one hand on Annie's shoulder and looked away, giving her privacy while standing close enough for her to feel held. That evening, after everyone left, Annie stayed behind to clean the counters. She liked the quiet after a full day, not the invisible kind she had known on the Aurelia, but the kind that came after honest work. The kitchen was tired, and so was she. Maya came back in from the alley carrying the trash bin. Chef Annie? Yes? I got accepted. Annie turned. Where? Culinary program downtown. Full support through the new trust. Ruth helped me apply. Marjorie scared them into reading my essay. From the office, Marjorie called. I encouraged professionalism. Maya smiled, but her eyes were wet. I start in January. Annie crossed the room and hugged her. Maya held on hard. I'm proud of you, Annie said. I'm scared. Good. Means you're awake. Maya pulled back and laughed. You stole that from Marjorie. She stole it from somebody else. Maya wiped her face. Will you still teach here when I'm gone? Yes. Good. Somebody has to burn onions for the next group. Annie watched her leave through the front door, stepping into the evening with her shoulders a little straighter than they had been months before. Later, Annie locked the kitchen and stood outside under the faded blue sign. Miami traffic moved beyond the block. The church next door had its lights on for Wednesday Bible study. The laundromat hummed. Ordinary sounds, good sounds. Her phone buzzed. A message from Harold. Heard about the Grace Carter table. She has not been erased. Annie read it twice. Then she reached into her pocket and unfolded the handkerchief. The blue letters AC had faded more with time. But now she no longer feared that fading. Cloth wore down when it was carried. Names stayed alive when they were used well. She pressed the handkerchief to her palm and looked through the window at the empty tables inside. She thought of Victor Langford's yacht, his white jacket, his voice cutting through the kitchen. She thought of the sentence that had started it all. "Your food disgusts me." Once, those words might have followed her for years. Now they belonged to him, not her. They had become evidence of what he could not see, because the food had not been disgusting. The lie was, the cruelty was, the room that used people and called it charity was. Annie turned from the window and started walking home. Tomorrow there would be onions to teach, grants to review, students to push, dishes to wash, and more mistakes than she could count. There would be no applause most days, no headlines, no chandeliers. That was all right. Grace had never promised her a stage. Grace had given her something better, a way to feed people without making them bow. And now Annie Carter, once hidden behind 2 blue letters, carried that promise into every kitchen that still had room for justice, memory, and one more person at the table. The lesson of Annie Carter's story is that a person's worth should never depend on titles, wealth, race, or public recognition. Annie deserved respect before anyone knew she was talented, before anyone called her a chef, and before the powerful people in the room realized they needed her. Her journey reminds us that injustice often survives because good people stay silent. But truth gains strength when ordinary people stand together. Real dignity is not given by the rich, the famous, or the powerful. It is carried quietly by those who work with honesty, protect others from being erased, and refuse to let cruelty have the final word. This video is a work of fiction created with the assistance of artificial intelligence. All characters, events, and situations are not real and do not represent any actual people or true stories. The content is intended for storytelling and emotional illustration only.